Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
All rise.
Good morning. Please have a seat. The matter before the court this day is the matter of City of Keene versus James Cleveland et al. If I could have counsel identify themselves and their clients for the record. Plaintiffs.
Your Honor, Robert Deedle of Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell on behalf of the City of Keene.
Your Honor, I'm here, Jon Meyer, on behalf of the defendants. The two defendants that are present today are Garret Ian, sitting next to me, and Ian Friedman, back in the courtroom.
Yes. Thank you.
Charlie Bauer, also for the city.
Thank you. The scope of the proceedings today is really, as far as I'm concerned, directed towards events that have taken place after October 1st of 2013. And unless counsel have a different request, I know that it was the plaintiff's request initially to limit the scope of proceedings to things that had occurred prior to that time. That was the subject of 3 days of evidentiary hearings back in 2013. But it's my intent just to have evidence related to things that have occurred after those hearings. But the counsel intend to present any evidence regarding events prior to October 1st of 2013?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Is the plaintiff ready to proceed?
Yes. Your Honor. If I may, before we call our first witness, I'd like to just take a minute to briefly touch on where we are. Since we were here 2 years ago, we've received clear guidance from the New Hampshire Supreme Court that I believe will frame our discussion today and is in keeping with the instructions that we just received. And that's specifically that this court has the equitable power to grant injunctive relief when there are significant governmental interests at stake, as there are here. With that in mind, it's our position that the record to date, what was established at the 3 prior evidentiary hearings, and the testimony that we're going to address today will demonstrate that the city has at least 3 such significant governmental interests. And those are keeping the peace on the streets, ensuring that the parking enforcement officers can do their job, which is municipal enforcement of ordinances, and providing a safe work environment for city employees. It's our position that those interests are deserving of protection and should result in a narrowly tailored injunction. So with that in mind, we're going to be calling the 2 parking enforcement officers today, and I'd like to start with Linda Desereau. Linda, if you can approach the stand.
Attorney Meyer, did you want to make a brief statement?
I don't, Your Honor, but I do want to raise one point, which I've raised with Attorney Deedle earlier, which is it seems to me it would considerably focus the proceeding and focus the testimony if we had some understanding as to what specific equitable relief the city is seeking. As Attorney Deedle said, that's the issue before the court, and I guess again it remains unclear to me as to what type of equitable relief is being requested. I would want to that would potentially frame some of my questions to the witnesses. So it would be helpful to have that at least as a proposal prior to starting the evidentiary part of the proceeding.
I take it and I may be jumping to what you're going to argue, but I think the way that you framed it was really that it would be within the court's discretion to determine what exactly, if relief was going to be granted, what the scope of that relief was going to be. But in the past, the city has made specific requests. It narrowed what was initially requested to something more limited. Are you prepared to lay out what the city's specific request is?
Yeah, we're not trying to hide the ball, Your Honor. Your summary is consistent with our position, which is that at the end of the day, we feel that the court needs to do an equitable balancing here and figure out what an appropriate injunction is. But we, of course, have a recommendation, and we believe that 10 feet separation would be an appropriate distance back where the respondents can engage in all the activities that we've discussed, but would provide a certain amount of safety and separation to diffuse the things that are implicating those three governmental interests that I addressed.
Does that answer your question, Attorney Myers?
It does, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Dietel.
So, Linda, if you could approach the stand. And if you'd raise your right hand, do you swear the testimony you're about to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Be seated. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Linda DeRusso, DeSruisseaux.
And you prefer to go by Lynn?
Yes, we have two Lindas in the office.
Lynn, to refresh the record, I think everybody here is largely familiar with what you do for the city, but could you just very briefly describe what your position is?
I work in the parking services and enforce the parking ordinances.
Then, as I think you just heard me say, the purpose of our hearing today is to bring the court up to speed on what's happened since October 2013. So I'd like to start with a video that you're the subject of, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about it. And, Your Honor, at this time, we have a video prepared. I've discussed this with Attorney Meyer. I believe he's prepared to stipulate that this was a video that was produced by his client, and I have copies on CD to mark as exhibits.
Any objection?
Talking about the Freeman.
Yeah, the one we
I had no objection on it.
Perhaps, and you're going to offer that as a full exhibit?
Yes.
Any objection to it being marked as a full exhibit? And why don't we make that, why don't we start with one for purposes of these proceedings, just to not complicate things and go back to the numbering system we had a couple of years ago. We'll make this Plaintiff's Exhibit 1 for purposes of the hearing. Thank you.
All right, so then I'm going to play this whole video. It's about 4 minutes long, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about it.
Hey, Johnny, where are you? Live, escape to Keene at freekeene.com. And we're out here in front of Keene State College. It's a beautiful day in Keene, New Hampshire. So it's actually voting day. As you can see, we have encountered a parking enforcer. So we want to make sure we got some meters that are filled up here. She was playing games earlier, trying to play like she was going to run across the street, but then didn't. Now she's turning around this way, and now she's turning around again. Don't you feel kind of silly doing that? Oh my goodness. Silly to the max. Silly, silly. Do they pay you to walk back and forth like that? Well, I appreciate you asking, but you're a government official, so you're subject to being talked to. Part of the, the Constitution of the the Constitution of New Hampshire. Part of the Constitution of New Hampshire is that government officials are supposed to be open and accountable. And so, to be accountable, this isn't harassment, ma'am. I'm simply talking to you as a government official. You're someone who should listen to what the people have to say. And in point of fact, as a member of parking enforcement, it is part of your job and your job description to actually put up with what people have to say to you. Because a lot of people don't like getting parking tickets, do they?
People don't like you either.
Oh, well, that's okay. I expect that to happen. Because we do activist stuff, and you know, that means that some people are going to get upset about it. Do you think that her bosses will be happy to pay her to walk back and forth all day? I don't really catch the real stuff in that.
If you leave me alone, I'll go.
Well, why don't you leave these people alone? Go back to your truck and drive away.
I'm doing my job.
Okay, doesn't look like it. I think your job is supposed to be handing out tickets.
You're repeating it.
Oh, she's fine. She's out here she's not leaving people alone. As soon as she stops leaving people alone, I'll leave her alone. How about that, Linda?
You're obnoxious.
who's here threatening to steal people's cars. That's her. That's what she does.
She's just doing her job.
Yeah, and that's stealing people's cars. That's what her job is. Yep, right here.
So this is all you do?
No, actually, I'm taking the day off. Doing some election work or giving people rides to the polls so they can vote.
Like this guy has
Job stuff. I actually own my own business, so I can set my own schedule.
I don't know.
Pretty nice. Yeah, I know, me too. You know, it wouldn't hurt to just be pleasant. Oh, I'm pleasant to most people who don't threaten other folks on a regular basis. And I'm not mean to you, I'm just following and putting people's, saving people from getting tickets. Which is a pretty pleasant thing to do, as a matter of fact. Have a nice day now. Try not to hurt too many people.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeene.com. Freekeene.com features audio,
Lynn, do you have a good memory of that video, of what occurred there?
Yeah.
I take it made an impression on you?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us, when did this happen?
Last summer.
And
Sorry, when?
can you repeat your answer, please?
Last summer?
Can you describe in your own words generally what was going on, what happened? I know we just watched the video, but if you could provide a brief summary.
I was just on my way down to Lower Main, but by the college to check the meters.
So what time of day would you say this was?
Probably just before noon or just after, between 11 and 1.
And who took the video?
Who was
who was
filming?
if you could identify who the person was that was filming the video.
Ian Bernard?
And do you see him in this room?
Yes.
Can you identify him for the record?
Yes, he's standing behind the camera.
We talked about personal safety, keeping the peace on the streets. Can you describe how you felt when you saw Mr. Freeman approaching you?
Dread, deep dread.
Why do you say dread?
Because it always transpired into all this negative energy and verbal assault and not being able to really express yourself in my position is it can be difficult.
Early on at the beginning of the video, we heard Mr. Freeman say something about you had been playing games before he took that. Was there an interaction right before this that's not shown on the video?
Well, he was on one side of the street and I decided to cross to the opposite side just to stay away from him, to keep some distance so I wouldn't have to go through that.
We saw you turning back and forth. Did you feel trapped?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. What about confined? Did you feel you couldn't get away?
Yes, because there were two people filming.
And if you could, since we didn't really see the other person, could you describe what the other person was doing?
He had an iPad and he appeared to be filming me too and being opposite of Mr. Bernard.
Did you think he was working with Mr. Freeman?
They were conversing, so I assumed that they were together, yes.
I noticed that most of the video was a discussion of Mr. Freeman trying to talk with you. Mm-hmm. About how far away from you was he?
At any given time, I would say probably Well, sometimes we're close, within 10 feet, and other times beyond.
I noticed you crossed the street during the video. It sort of looked like you were almost rushing to get away.
I was.
Is that a fair description, that you were rushing to get away?
Yes.
Has that happened before or since October 2013, being followed in the street like that?
Yes.
And can you focus on cars coming and things of that nature when you're being followed?
I do, because I want to take my focus off of I'm being followed or pursued in some way. So yes, I do pay attention to that for a couple reasons. And I've been doing this for a number of times, too many to count.
When this sort of thing is going on, and I'm going to call it harassing, yelling, being followed.
Well, yeah, I think the witness, the questioner is testifying at this point.
I'm happy to rephrase the question, Your Honor.
Thank you.
You just heard me saying how I would interpret it, I guess. How would you interpret his conduct?
It's very offensive, and I'm not referring to language used, I'm just using the body language, the words, the looks, that kind of thing. I feel like I have to defend myself, and in order to do that, I have to get away from it, because that's my only defense.
At that point, I want to back up to a specific section here, because we couldn't always hear, I think, exactly what you were saying. So I'm going to show it to you and then ask you if you could tell me what you were saying.
Okay.
Earlier, trying to play like she was going to run across the street, but then didn't. Now she's turning around this way, and now she's turning around again. Don't you feel kind of silly doing that? Oh my goodness. Silly to the max. Silly, silly. Do they pay you to walk back and forth like that?
What'd you just say there?
I believe it said I asked you not to speak to me.
And did he comply with that request?
No.
Well, I appreciate you asking, but you're a government official, so you're subject to being talked to. Part of the, part of the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution.
And what were you saying there?
I was saying I've had enough.
How many times did you have to say it?
Several.
I notice you're sticking your arm out as if to physically block him.
Right.
What were you trying to do there?
Just enforce my point that I want you to, I've had enough.
By that point, how far would you say he is from you?
I would say probably within 10 feet.
Would you say 2 arm lengths?
Wait,
No,
I think he's this is early now
I'll
leading questions.
I'll withdraw the question. Did you feel he was in your personal space?
I felt that he either was or he was going to be. And that's the same feeling to me of dread.
So we just watched.
I just did not catch the last part of what you said.
I didn't hear what you said, so.
I said either he was or his intentions were to be, which creates the same dread for me.
We just watched a brief snippet of the video. I know it's clear from the video, but can you tell us physically, where were you?
I was on the sidewalk.
Okay. Are there any meters around you here?
Yes, there's where I am, so to my right, there's a grass strip, and then the meters are along the curb.
About how many car lengths away would you say? 3 or 4?
No, not maybe 2.
Okay. Could Mr. Bernard, say, reach out and just plug a meter right there?
Yes.
Could?
Yes.
I can show you the video again quickly.
Subject being talked to, part of the, the Constitution of the Constitution of New Hampshire. Part of the Constitution of New Hampshire is that.
Is he plugging any meters?
No, he's videotaping me and running with me. That's why I was doing the reverse direction. Obviously, it didn't work.
About how long did this encounter last?
I would say 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes maybe, at the most.
During that time, were you able to effectively do your job?
No, not at all.
I'd like to go to another section of the video and have you tell us for the record what it was that you were saying.
Well, why don't you leave these people alone? Go back to your truck and drive away.
I'm doing my job.
Okay, doesn't look like it. I think your job is supposed to be handing out tickets.
You're repeating it.
Can you tell us for the record what you just said?
Wait, I don't understand why she needs to repeat what she just said on the video, if the video is an exhibit.
Your Honor, if we go up on appeal, we're going to need a clear transcript of what was said, and the audio from the video, my understanding, is not being picked up in the transcription.
I think that's, the video itself, though, is a full exhibit that would be included as part of the court record. I think, given, for clarity's sake, though, the objection's overruled.
You can answer the question.
What was I
You
saying?
need me to play it again?
Yes, please.
If you leave me alone, I'll go.
Well, why don't you leave these people alone? Go back to your truck and drive away.
I'm doing my job.
Okay, doesn't look like it. I think your job is supposed to be handing out tickets.
You're repeating it.
So if you could state for the record what you said.
I asked him to leave me alone, and I would, go away on my own, and that he was impeding me from doing my job.
How'd you finally break free from Mr. Freeman?
I
I-
object to the phrase "break free."
Sustained.
How did this encounter end?
I walked to the opposite side of the street via the crosswalk and headed downtown. I was on foot.
Did you get any assistance from anybody?
I had one young girl that started walking with me. I did not know her, but it was nice.
I'm going to ask you some questions about that section, and then we're going to wrap up this discussion of the video.
All right, so oh, I'm not the one who's
Repeating it.
Did you hear what she just said?
I did not. I could not. Sorry.
If you try and listen carefully, I'm going to play it one last time.
Okay.
alone. Go back to your truck and drive away.
I'm doing my job.
Okay, doesn't look like it. I think your job is supposed to be handing out tickets.
You're repeating it.
catch that?
Something about, can you just go along? No, I don't, and I don't remember it. It was so long ago.
Where was that woman coming from?
She came from across the street in the same area.
Did you get the sense that she was purposefully interjecting herself?
No.
Objection, speculation.
I'll draw the question. Based on your observation, what was she doing?
I believe she was just going along with her day, and she walked into that happening.
Why do you think she stepped between you and Mr. Freeman?
Objection,
Sustained.
speculation.
Sustained.
Has the public ever gotten involved in these encounters before?
And yes.
So to wrap up this discussion of the video, are you able to do your job when this type of encounter occurs?
No.
Based on your observations, does it upset the public?
Wait, objection. How does she know where?
Sustained.
Does it make you feel like you're being harassed?
Yes, absolutely.
Is this exchange representative of the types of problems you have with what's been described as Robin Hooding?
Correct.
Let's talk about your day-to-day. Can you tell me what your schedule is currently?
The hours? I work 7:30 to 3:30,
And what days do you work?
Monday through Friday.
Are you still being followed?
As of the last few weeks, I have not seen anyone, but before that, yes.
During the period of the last 2 years, from October 2013 through today, were you being followed during that period?
Yes.
About how often would you say?
I would say 3 to 4 days a week.
And who's following you around?
Garret Ian.
Has it reduced since the Supreme Court's order came out this spring?
It hasn't been as many people or all day, but it's been the same.
Do people other than Mr. Ian follow you around?
Occasionally he has others with him that are unknown to me.
I'm sorry,
Sorry, I
Garret.
couldn't hear what you said.
Occasionally he has others with him, but they're unknown to me. I don't know who they are.
So not one of the other respondents in this case?
Correct, not.
And Lynn, if you could try and speak up when you answer
Okay.
the questions, that'd be great. Thank you. How about since the court scheduled this hearing in the middle of the summer? So I'm talking August, September, has it reduced even more?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, it has.
Do you think that's purposeful?
Objection.
Sustained.
Speculation.
Sustained. I mean, she can say what she did, but she can't characterize what the motivation might be. That might be an inference you'd like the court to draw from things, but for her to speculate, she can describe what she's personally observed.
Understood, Your Honor. Do you still get told to quit?
Pardon me?
And in the prior evidentiary hearings, we heard testimony that you were frequently told to quit your job.
Yes.
Words to that effect. That
Yes.
still happens.
Yes.
Graham Colson is one of the named respondents in this case. Is he still following you around?
No,
Do you know why not?
I'm not clear.
Wait. What?
I think she said she didn't know.
I don't understand the question.
I was simply asking her if she knows why he's not following her around.
And I think there, if I'm correct,
gonna
you
answer
said
that?
no. Is there an objection to that, to just that,
Well,
the scope of that question?
The concern I have is, inasmuch as she has some, like, admissible response, that's one thing, but again, I'm concerned that the question seems to be calling upon her to speculate.
Your Honor, this line of questioning is about what Lynn is experiencing on the streets.
But that's not, no, that was not what was being asked her. The question was, why has Mr. Colson stopped following you? That has nothing to do with what she's experiencing on the streets.
She might very well have an answer based on what she's experienced on the streets. But, Your Honor, this is, we heard her answer, so I can move on. I'm going to hand you a document, which I'd like to mark as an exhibit. May I approach you?
Absolutely. And you can freely approach, as both counsel can. There's no need to ask for further requests to do that.
Then,
Excuse me, is this being marked as an exhibit?
yes.
All right, so that we exhibit 2?
It's just for identification at this point.
Then could you look that over briefly? You can just flip through it.
Not familiar.
Can you identify what that is?
This is as it says at the top, a officer time gap report that we record are any differences in time that we have other than a normal day, like any big breaks in time.
Is this a report that you produce?
Yes,
So this is your report?
at the end of each day, right?
What does this report, let me rephrase that. There's a number of entries. It looks like a list of entries. What are these entries?
On the left-hand side,
That's correct.
they're the ticket numbers, the times, and where, the location,
So could you
and the
describe,
violation.
could you describe what the purpose of this report is? What does it do?
It tracks the minutes and time between the tickets that I've done, what time I did them and where.
So I'm looking at what's labeled page 1 of 3, March 24th. It's the first page. Just so that we fully understand, as I read down, I see numbers in the third column, 21, 18, 2, 3. What are those numbers indicating?
Minutes between tickets issued.
And on the right-hand side, there's a handwritten note that's been circled. Is that your handwriting?
That is my handwriting.
And could you read what that note says?
It says G. Ian plus female, pink hair, 11:15 in an arrow.
So tell us, what does that mean to you?
That means that's the time of the day that I encountered the two that I just named, and the arrow indicates that it went on until I left for the day.
And why do you make that notation?
In order to, for our supervisors to see that what was happening during those times, if there's a big discrepancy in our ticket, minutes between tickets.
Can you explain that a little further? What do you mean by a big discrepancy?
Well, if I just keep walking around and it's been, 20 or 30 or more minutes between tickets, I have to justify. That's the whole reason for this report.
So are you saying that when you make that notation, it's because there's a disruption that's stopping you from ticketing?
That's exactly what I'm saying, yes.
You testified earlier and at the prior hearings that these activities are a regular part of your day-to-day. So if you would, and so that we have a clear record, I'd like you to flip through here. There's about, I think, a little over 20 pages. And at each notation, if you could read what you wrote and the date.
Everything or just the circled?
Your Honor, I can
Let me ask, is there any objection to this being marked as a full exhibit?
No, except for the fact of the following. The claim, as I understand it, is just dealing with the first date of March 24th, is that during those timeframes after 11:15, the number of tickets were being reduced. But we don't know that because they only provided us with the first page of this report. So no idea how many tickets she, I assume that the report has a listing of all the, or somewhere the city has a listing of all the tickets that she's done for that day. And to make this report, to make this exhibit complete, that information should be included. I mean, if the city's really going to claim that there was a reduction in number of tickets that she reduced after 11:15, whatever the legal relevance of that may be, then at the least there should be the documents to support that should be provided. But getting back to the court's earlier point, I would certainly agree that rather than having her read everything on this exhibit, on this set of exhibits, which I think is redundant, I have no problem with this being introduced as an exhibit.
It does, and I'll just say to the latter point, it appears, I know it's handwriting, but it seems pretty clear what's being intended by the markings. And if you want to have her generally describe that 11 with the arrow, what that indicates, and what she's, I don't know that she needs to go through every single entry, but let me ask, is this being offered for the purpose of suggesting that there was, at least in part, that there were fewer tickets that were written up during that time period? So it sounds like Attorney Dietel is shaking his head. It doesn't sound like that's the purpose for which this is being offered. I think if it's being offered to demonstrate or to show that the activity was going on those dates during that time period, that's a different purpose. If that's the only purpose for which it's being offered, then what does it matter that there are maybe other pages that document the ticket activity after that time of day?
Well, Your Honor, I would agree with that, but Attorney Dietel just went through with this witness what's the purpose of that entry, and she talked about how it was explaining that, I mean, again, if they're not going to argue that they're raising this in regard to affecting the number of tickets being entered, then I don't object, but that was the whole line of questioning.
I thought that, I might be wrong, but I thought the witness was just describing the purpose of the document to why this report is prepared, and then that explains why this document is even generated to begin with, but then her notations to describe the activity that was taking place that day. I don't know if it was, am I correct that that's the purpose that it was being offered for?
Your Honor, that's roughly correct. This document shows that this is a regular, recurring event that's causing a significant amount of disruption.
Well, but the regular, recurring event part of it, I don't have any issue with. It's the significant disruption part of it that I'm concerned about. This first document says it's page 1 of 3. So I'd like to see pages 2 and 3.
Well, Your Honor, this is exactly why I'd ask that his objection be overruled, is that we're here today to discuss things like frequency and what's the disruption and what's the magnitude of the impact on things like their ability to do their job. This is a line of questioning that came up at oral argument at the Supreme Court of what's it like to have somebody following you around every day. And so I think it's important that we have a clear record of what's going on. This is frequent, and I think the record should show that.
Right. I think the objection is to the characterization of it as disruption. I think that you can have, if you want to use a document to help the witness, orient the witness to activity taking place on the specific dates and to have her describe the activity, that's one thing. I think that, I may be wrong, but it sounds like the objection is to the use of the word disruption.
Your Honor, my principal objection is the introduction of page 1 of this report without providing pages 2 and 3.
The purpose of the report is the handwritten notation to reflect when this is occurring and the impact that it's having when it's occurring.
But the impact cannot be assessed. If we're talking about impact on tickets actually issued, that impact cannot be assessed without looking at pages 2 and 3, which are the pages that would record the number of tickets that were being issued during the period of alleged disruption.
This has been a misconception from the beginning in this case by Attorney Meyer and his clients. This case is not about the number of tickets being issued. This is about providing a safe work environment for the city's employees, and this goes directly to that point.
Okay, I think I understand where the plaintiff's arguing and what the defense is arguing. If I understand the plaintiff's position, you're not offering this in any way for the information that's contained about the gaps of time between tickets or to suggest that there's been some sort of an economic loss to the city because of the lack of ticketing activity. You're offering this to demonstrate what was, or for the purpose to say that one of the respondents was present and one of the respondents was engaged in certain activity on the dates in question. And so to the extent the objection relates to wanting to understand or present evidence as to what took place after that time in terms of there not being gaps of time in between tickets, because it's not being offered for that purpose, I don't understand the objection, Attorney Meyer.
Well, Your Honor, I would agree that if they're not offering for that purpose, then you don't necessarily need page 2 and 3. But if the witness is going to testify that, in fact, this activity caused her to issue less tickets or interfere with her ability to do that part of her job, then I do want to see pages 2 and 3, because that would be her report on what actually happened that day.
Are you going to be suggesting that she was unable to do her job in part because of on the specific days in question?
I am, Your Honor, with the but that during the periods of time that are reflected by the notation. So this notation on the first page says 11:15, and there is an arrow. But what I'm asking about is what happens at that period of time.
I know, but the page 1 only goes to 10:57 is the problem. The time frame after 11:15 is covered on pages 2 and 3, which I don't have.
Why don't I say this? I think the objection is well-founded. You can't present part of the picture of what was happening that day and not allow the respondents to be able to see a complete picture of what was happening that day. Are you prepared? Do you have the entire document with the time period for the remainder periods of the day?
Your Honor, oddly enough, this document came to my attention in response to a discovery request from Attorney Meyer. And his request was, please identify each interaction, essentially, that the parking enforcement officers have with the respondents. These notations indicate those interactions. That's the purpose of this document. And so we don't have the full day. I'll agree on that point. But we're not concerned with the full day. What we're concerned about is what happens when these guys show up on the scene and start interacting with the parking enforcement officers.
But the problem is that the part of the document that's missing is the part of the document that covers the hours of this alleged interaction. I mean, I wouldn't complain if we were missing the part that was before or after. But in this particular case, the witnesses testified that Mr. Ian was engaged in Robin Hooding after 11:15, presumably from 11:15 until the end of her workday, which I think she said was 3 o'clock. And those are the hours that are contained on pages 2 and 3. So that the hours contained in page 1 are essentially useless. Whereas
Your Honor. Yes.
All right, Glenn. Back to the questioning. I'd like to ask you, we talked about March 24th. Did you encounter any of the respondents on March 26th? Do you recall?
Yes. The same, Garret Ian, female, pink hair, 11 o'clock and on. I do not know her name.
And Lynn, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you your memory of specific dates, and if you need to refer to these as notes to refresh your recollection, is that appropriate?
Absolutely.
Do you recall if you encountered any of the respondents on March 27th, 2015?
Yes, it's Garret Ian in mid-morning.
Do you recall if you encountered any of the respondents on April 1st, 2015?
Yes, Garret Ian, 1300, and the arrow means for the rest of my day.
Your Honor, just to save time, I mean, if I can give my client a minute to review this document, I'm probably prepared to stipulate that she saw him on those dates at those times.
So we'll go through each one, Your Honor, for the complete record of the frequency of the interactions with the defendants.
Okay, one counsel at a time. There's a counsel who's questioning the witness, one counsel at a time.
I understand that. You looked at me, Judge.
Okay.
Your Honor, my feelings are the same. I would like to be able to go through for a clear record and address the days that Lynn remembers the respondents showing up.
Okay. We'll proceed that way. The objection's overruled.
Lynn, did you see any of the respondents on April 3rd?
Yes, Garret Ian, and I have afternoon only.
Do you recall if you saw any of the respondents on April 22nd?
Correct, it was Garret Ian from 12:30 till the end of my day.
Do you recall if you saw any of the respondents on April 24th?
Yes. Garret Ian again, and I noted down 11:45 with an arrow again, meaning the rest of my day.
Do you remember anything about that day?
I know I wrote down bad day in parentheses.
Why would you have done that?
Well, wait, again, it calls upon her to speculate. If she knows, I don't have a problem with asking the question, but the way he was asked made it sound like to ask her to speculate.
Do you recall what took place that day?
I do not.
You do not, okay.
Do you recall seeing the respondents on April 29th, 2015?
Correct. The same Garret Ian, and it says 14:15 in an arrow.
Do you recall seeing any respondents on April 30th, 2015?
That would be Garret Ian, and I have written down 12:45 and for the rest of the day.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on May 4th, 2015?
That would be Garret Ian, and I noted down 12:35 with an arrow for the rest of the day.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on May 5th, 2015?
That would be Garret Ian plus female, unknown to me. That's why I wrote female from 14:30 to the end of my day.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on May 6th, 2015?
Garret Ian, and I have 14:30 down here, and that would mean that that's probably the only time I seen him that day. There's no arrow.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on May 13th, 2015?
Yes, it was Garret Ian in the female with the pink hair. I do not know her name. From 12:20 till the end of the day, my day.
So if I could pause on May 13th for 1 second. Based on what you just said, are you sometimes followed by more than one person?
Sometimes, yes.
How does that make you feel?
Well, it's intimidating because I try to do my best to keep my distance and to stay away. And with two people, it can make that more difficult.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on May 21st, 2015?
That would be Garret Ian.
What about on May 22nd, 2015? Do you recall seeing any of the respondents?
Yes, Garret Ian and the same female.
Do you know who that person is that keeps...
I don't know her name. I've never asked. Or if I've been told, I don't recall.
Do I understand, though, that you think she's working with Garret Ian?
Object to the word working.
Do you feel that they're together?
Yes.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on May 26, 2015?
Yes, Garret Ian.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on June 11th, 2015?
Garret Ian and female.
We've just talked about many interactions that you've had. And so if I could pause for a second here, what's the impact of those interactions on you?
Your Honor, again, this is like, first of all, he's testifying. Secondly, I mean, he's asking specific questions. Now he's asking for essentially an opinion. I mean, he's asked in terms of specifics what the effect was. Now he's asking her essentially editorialize to give an opinion.
What is the impact on you just generally from, I'm not sure what you're asking.
I can break it down. What's the impact on your feelings of personal safety, if any?
I feel a little panicked when I eye them.
What's the impact on your feeling of being able to do your job, if any?
The impact is I feel like I use most of my time trying to stay away and get away from them.
Does this cause you stress and anxiety?
Oh, yes.
I apologize if I asked you this question already, but do you recall seeing any of the respondents on June 11th, 2015?
Yes, Garret Ian.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on June 17th, 2015?
Yes, Garret Ian.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on June 18th, 2015?
I have free Keene, so I'm assuming it was him. It might have been him and others. I didn't note their names.
Well, let me ask you, what does the term free Keene mean to you, if you can clarify?
It's a group of people that have a like-minded way of looking at things.
So does that reference mean that you were being followed by a group?
More than one.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on June 19th, 2015?
Garret Ian.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on July 2nd, 2015?
Garret Ian.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on July 14th, 2015?
Garret Ian.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on July 15th, 2015?
Garret Ian.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on August 5th, 2015?
Garret Ian and female.
Do you recall these instances where you've had interactions with Mr. Ian as ones that have made it so that you were unable to do your job because of him?
Again, Your Honor, it's both a leading question and it's redundant.
It is leading. Sustained is leading.
What impact, if any, is there on you when Mr. Ian is present?
Your Honor, again, that's been asked and answered.
I'll withdraw the question. What time period did this gap report cover, the days that we just spoke about?
Start to finish?
Yeah, roughly.
Roughly.
And you can talk in months.
Oh, time-wise, clockwise, or days, or?
I'm looking for, you can talk seasonally if you want. Was this in the spring, the fall, the winter?
Well, it would have been late winter, according to this that I have right here.
So if you
Until
can,
spring.
I don't mean to
Till
belabor this point,
mid-June.
but can you tell us from your recollection what, or from refreshing your recollection by looking at your notes, what months these were?
It's March 2015 to August of 2015.
So we were last before the court in the summer and fall of 2013. Do these notes reflect a sample of the interactions that you've had with Mr. Ian?
Again, I did not understand that question.
I'll rephrase it. Are these the only times that you've interacted with Mr. Ian in the past 2 years?
I've noted down the times. That's essentially what that notation is for.
What about in the months prior to this, from October 2013 through May 2015? Did you have any interactions with him?
I'm sure, yes.
I'm going to ask you some questions about things that you previously testified to, and I'd like you to address them in the context of what's gone on since October 2013. You previously testified that you have, and I'm quoting your words from the transcript, that awful anticipation of, here I am, I'm having a great morning, and then boom.
Your Honor, I thought the purpose of this hearing, as we stated at the beginning of the hearing, was to testify as to what has occurred since October 2013. Rehashing her testimony from X number of years ago certainly doesn't accomplish that. I mean, she's been asked about specific events occurring since then, and if he has more questions about that, I have no objection. But to ask whether essentially she still feels the same that she felt before, it's not, I don't see what relevant, it's just beyond the scope of what I thought we were addressing today.
Response.
Your Honor, my understanding is that we're here today to talk about the impact in the last 2 years. That can't be severed from what went on the prior 2 to 3 years. It's a continuum of events. If I may finish. And so what I'm intending to ask Lynn is if the testimony that she gave in 2013 is still an accurate representation over the last 2 years of what she's feeling.
So it sounds like they're going to relate it to how she feels from October 2013 to the present.
That's correct.
Well, he said whether, if he wants to ask her that question, I suppose he can ask her that question, although again, it seems to me outside the scope of things. But I mean, if he keeps, he can ask it as one question. He seemed to be in the process of asking it as 20 questions.
Right.
And I don't think it's necessary to sort of just to sort of quote her back to herself is not necessary.
I'm going to allow it overruled.
And I'm going to be brief, Your Honor. This is not a long line of questioning here. You previously testified that you have awful anticipation of, here I am. I'm having a great morning, and then boom, there's someone there, and it all starts. Are you still having that feeling?
Yes.
You also previously testified, sometimes I just hear can just hear footfalls behind me, and I just tense all up. It's waiting for this whole game to start. Are you still having this feeling?
Yeah. Can I just sum it up that as far as the before and after the last trial, there has been no change in how I feel.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Why don't we take a short break? I'm guessing this is going to be more than a 5-minute examination. I just want to take a break, and then we'll resume the testimony. Thank you.
All rise.
Good morning again. Please have a seat. If I could just see counsel briefly at the bench. Attorney Dietel. I'm sorry, no, you were done. Attorney Meyer.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Russo, again, my name is Jon Meyer, and I represent the defendants in this case. Now, I understand, how long have you held your current position? How long?
Just over 15 years.
15 years. And I take it that your position requires you to be in downtown Keene, basically from 9 to 3, 5 days a week?
8.
8 to 3, okay. And I take it you must know quite a lot of local people at this point?
Yes.
And I take it that it's not uncommon as part of your job that people, local people come up to you and engage in conversation?
That's correct.
And sometimes that when they engage in conversation with you, they may be within a couple, body length away from you or fairly close to you. That's not uncommon.
No, that's not uncommon.
And I take it that you have no objection to that type of interaction?
That's correct.
Objection, Your Honor.
Basis?
What does he mean by no objection? Can you clarify the question?
By the word objection?
Could you restate the question?
Yeah. Do you have any objection to when somebody comes up to you just to engage in social conversation in downtown Keene while you're working? Is that a problem for you?
No, because I know these people.
And
Your Honor, if I may, before we continue, are we talking about events between October 2013 now and 2015?
Well, Your Honor, I'm trying to.
I think that's a fair point. The hearing is limited to events that have taken place from October 1st of 2013 to the present.
Right, but let's just ask about the last 2 years. Is it the case that from time to time, people in downtown Keene, putting aside that any of the defendants, come up to you and engage in conversation?
Of course they do, yeah.
And that's a fairly standard part of your workday, correct?
I would say so.
And they often would come up fairly close to you so you can hear what they're saying and they can hear what you're saying, correct?
Correct.
And that's not, in itself, that's not a problem, correct?
No.
And you don't have any sort of type work rule or policy or ordinance or anything else that prevents people from talking to you while you're working?
No.
Now, with respect to the conversations that you have described as having with people from the Robin Hood group, and perhaps conversation is the wrong word, sounds like they're fairly one-sided to some degree, but what you're objecting to what they're saying to you, is that true?
Yes, in part.
Yeah. Okay. And you testified earlier that you felt that you, make sure I get your testimony accurately. Do I understand correctly that it's your opinion or your feeling that what's being said to you by at least Mr. Freeman is offensive?
Offensive. I feel it's delivered to intimidate.
Well, putting aside what Mr. Freeman's intention may be, do you find that, I mean, we heard the video, we heard what he said to you. Did you find that to be intimidating, what he said?
Yes.
So that was intimidating to you?
Yes.
And why was it intimidating to you?
I guess it would be the tone and the way that it's delivered.
So there was something about his...
And the objection, I mean, in the object of why he's doing that I'm thinking of all the time this is going on, and it's not the first time. And I can almost understand what's going to happen next. I can see it coming before me, and that's the part that bothers me.
Now, you have... if Mr. Freeman came up to you to talk to you about the weather, would that be intimidating to you?
I wouldn't. When I see Mr. Freeman, I want to cross the street.
Ask you a question, please. If Mr. Freeman came up to you and just engaged in you about the weather, would that be intimidating?
Yes.
So at this point, it doesn't matter what he does or what he says, but you regard his presence as being intimidating.
Right, because of the former things that have been said and actions done.
Now, in terms of this document, which I think we've marked as Exhibit 2 for identification, which is the Officer Time Gap Report, and I take it that's a document you fill out every day?
We print it out every day.
So it's produced every day, but only some day. Do you write hand notations on it every day or not?
Yes.
So even on the dates that we don't have, we only have a relatively small selection of dates here, but even on the other dates, you would have a handwritten notation.
Right.
Now, did you have any part in the selection of which pages were selected and which pages were not selected?
No.
If council would approach.
Yeah.
Attorney Meyer.
Yes. Is it fair to say that these documents, to the best of your knowledge, represent the only interactions you had with any members of the defendants during the time frame covered by these documents, which is essentially from March of 2015 to August of 2015? And if you want to look at these first, I'm happy to have you do that before answering.
I've already looked at them, thank you.
So these are basically the records, to the best of your knowledge, of all of the interactions you had with the defendants during this time frame from March to August 2000.
It's possible that I might have missed a few days making only that notation about that interaction.
All right, well, putting aside the possibility you might have missed a couple of days, these basically represent the days that you had interactions with the defendants in the March to August time frame.
Approximately, yes.
Now, if any of the defendants had said something to you on those dates that was particularly intimidating, or if they had physically interfered with your work or done something of that nature, would you have made a note of that?
That would have been included in just this citing, but not that detailed, as for word, no.
Would you have made some reference, you know, if they'd done something that was you regarded as being particularly objectionable, would you have made some reference to that in this report?
I think that's probably what the bad day meant.
All right, so something happened on that bad day, but you don't recall what it was.
I'm sure I'm sure it was probably...
All right, but again, I don't want you to speculate.
Okay, but I'm trying to...
I know, but either you recall what happened on that day or you don't.
That specific words on that specific day, I do not.
Now, is it fair to say that of all of the notations in time frame March through August 2015, it's only that one day do you make reference to a bad day or anything like a bad day? Every other notation, you simply mention either Garret and the pink-haired lady, and the dates. And I think on one occasion you mentioned that Mr. Ian has a video. And again, I'm happy to have you look at this if it helps your recollection. As far as I can tell, that one bad day, or you have it in copy in front of you,
right.
It's only that one day in which you make a reference to a particularly negative interaction.
Right.
Is that correct?
Well, it doesn't lessen the fact that the rest of the days.
Your Honor, she's trying to answer the
question.
No,
it was, yeah, you have to respond to the specific question that was posed.
Right.
The bad day probably referred...
No, my question was I already asked you about the bad day. My question was, no other entry reflects any type of negative action or statement in terms of your interaction with Mr. Ian on that day. And I'm asking you about this document.
All of these are negative.
I'm not asking, that's not my question. My question was that your notation on these documents only contains one negative reference for the entire time frame. Is that correct or not?
That's correct, and it says
now,
bad
excuse
day.
me, that was my question.
Your Honor, now she can finish her answer to that.
Your Honor, I think there's a difference between finishing an answer and engaging in argument. They're entitled to cross-examine her.
To do some redirect. I agree, but I think there was something more you wanted to say in response to that question. I'm going to give you that opportunity. What more did you want to say?
That he's specifically referring to that one day, that day. that I wrote bad day.
Now, is it correct, there is no reference in any of these documents to defendant James Cleveland. Have you had any Robin Hooding interactions with Mr. Cleveland since October of 2013?
There was one occasion, it was during their intervention, which is, I can't recall what month it is, but they should know. He was here with some people that evidently they were invited to participate in their Robin Hood actions.
So, to the best of your recollection, since October of 2013, you've had one interaction with Mr. Cleveland.
That's correct.
Since October 2013, have you had any interactions with Kate Ager?
Negative, none.
Since October 2013, have you had any interactions with Graham Colson?
Describe interaction.
Well, have you had any has he engaged in anything that would be described as Robin Hooding activity in your presence?
No.
Has Mr. Iyer, since October 2013, engaged in any Robin Hooding activity in your presence?
No, and I answered negative the first time.
Now, in terms of the Mr. Freeman, a video was shown involving yourself and Mr. Freeman. Now, do I accurately understand that during the course of that interview that you were walking on a sidewalk?
I was on the sidewalk.
Okay. Mr. Freeman was not on that sidewalk, correct?
At times.
Well, he was actually, we say at times, what do you mean by that?
There's grass and there's sidewalk, so he was on the sidewalk at times, not exclusively.
Well, during most of the time shown by the video, where was he located?
There's a cemented path that leads up to the sidewalk. He was there, and then as I tried walking south, which is past the college, he would be running in the grass area where the meters are located.
So there is a grassy area between the sidewalk where you were stationed and the meters, correct?
That's correct.
It's a fairly wide grassy area?
Yes.
And that's where he was located?
Yes.
And at any time, did he physically block you?
Physically blocked me? You mean, did he physically step in front of me?
Yes.
No, but I wouldn't say he stepped directly in front of me within a hand's length, but I didn't feel that it wasn't a possibility, and that's why I kept turning away.
So he didn't actually step in front of you, but you were concerned that he might? Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Now, getting back to Mr. Ian for a minute, there was a number of questions made to you earlier during direct examination about Mr. Ian following you. Isn't it correct that for the large majority of the time when Mr. Ian is engaging in Robin Hood activity that he's not behind you but in front of you?
Both.
Isn't he primarily in front of you trying to essentially go to the meter, to place quarters in the meter as you're heading towards the meter?
He can be, yes.
That's where he's most of the time, correct? I'm not saying he never is behind you, but he's mostly in front of you, not following you anywhere.
Right, if he isn't looking for me.
Well, in other words, once he finds you doing your job, then where he primarily tries to station himself is in front of you so he can get to the meter and put stickers on the car windshields, etc.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, you made a comment earlier in your direct examination about essentially being, felt that you were being subject to verbal assaults and you were frustrated because you were not able to express yourself. Now, are you prohibited by anybody from expressing yourself?
Expressing myself?
Yes. I mean, as you are today in the courtroom. And the phrase "express yourself" was one you used.
I'll tell you why I don't want to.
Excuse me, you can have a chance to do that, but my question is, are you prohibited from, and we'll get there, are you prohibited by anybody from expressing yourself?
It's been suggested that it's better not to engage. And I use the word engage, meaning I don't want to start a back and forth in an argument because it's just, I don't want to do that.
So it has been suggested to you better not to argue with the Robin Hooders.
I don't want to anyway.
You have decided not to argue with them.
Yes.
But there's nothing prohibiting you from arguing with them if you choose to.
Argue, I don't like the word argue. Talk with, converse maybe?
I'm
not because of everything that's gone on. I have no desire.
You don't want to talk to them, basically?
No.
Okay. But you're in no way prevented from talking to them?
No.
Okay. Now, in terms of numbers of people, you have cited in this time frame from March to August that Mr. Ian, on occasion, Mr. Ian and a female with pink hair. Has there ever been more than 2 people?
Yes.
When?
Off and on.
There's no reference in here during this time frame to more than 2 people.
It might be just somebody on the street that joins in with them, but it's very brief.
But in terms of on an ongoing basis, it's never been more than 2 people in this time frame, is that correct?
In this time frame, yeah.
And most of the time, it's Mr. Ian by himself?
Most of the time.
Now, you testified again about the video involving Mr. Freeman. How many times, going back over 2 years, has Mr. Freeman engaged in Robin Hood activity when you were personally involved?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that one.
Yes, how many times has Mr. Freeman engaged in Robin Hooding activity with you during the last 2 years?
Many.
Recall.
Pardon me?
If you remember.
I do remember.
How many?
A specific number?
That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, I can't give you a specific number. I can just say it's been more than a dozen times.
More than a dozen times?
Yeah.
More than 2 dozen times?
No.
So somewhere between 1 dozen and 2 dozen times over the course of 2 years.
You know, quite honestly, I haven't counted them.
Now, the video, you testified earlier that you saw Mr. Freeman on the other side of the street before the video started?
Say that again?
You testified that you saw Mr. Freeman on the other side of the street before the video started, is that correct?
No, we were on the same side, and I crossed over.
All right, so you crossed over to avoid him.
Yes.
And then then somebody began filming?
Yes.
And now that film was been represented by Attorney Deedle to have lasted 4 minutes. Is that correct? At least that's what you heard him say, right?
If it says 4 minutes, it seemed a lot longer to me at the time.
But you would agree, based on what's now been represented, that the interaction lasted
What it shows, yes.
approximately 4 minutes.
Yes.
Your Honor, if I might clarify, since Attorney Meyer is describing what he believes I represented, what I think I said was that the video itself was approximately 4 minutes.
That's
I asked Lynn how long she remembered the interaction, which is broader than the video.
I know, but I simply, well, now you're arguing.
I understand, and I don't want speaking objections like that with that relate to the substance of a witness's testimony. If there's going to be a speaking objection like that, if there's going to be an objection, why don't counsel ask to approach? I know we did that a little bit, but if it's going to relate to the substance of testimony, then I'd like it to be done at the bench.
I understand, Your Honor. I was just
Thank
trying to
you.
clarify.
No, I understand. Not a problem.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Lynn, you were asked by Attorney Meyer about your interactions with the public. Are there other members of the public that follow you around in the way that you've described Garret Ian following you around?
No.
Do you have the same sort of discussions and conversations with them as you do with Mr. Ian?
No.
We've talked about the gap report, and Your Honor, I think given the amount that it's been discussed at this point, I'd move that it be entered as a full exhibit.
Any objection?
Well, yeah, you know, it's not clear to me whether, are we talking now about the original documents that were submitted, or as I understand it, they've now submitted a more extensive?
I took that to mean that the document that was originally discussed.
Right. I mean, I thought the understanding was that I was going to sort of review them at some later recess, and presumably, I mean, I would suggest that the issue of their admissibility or lack of admissibility be addressed later. I'm not going to claim it's being waived.
What I would propose, Your Honor, to clarify is that they be entered as a full exhibit as the documents that were used to refresh Lynn's recollection. And we will be providing Attorney Meyer with the complete report, and if he'd like to enter that as a full exhibit, he'll certainly have the opportunity to do so.
You know, I have no objection to them being in.
Okay. Plans exhibit number 2 is a full exhibit.
So we were just talking about the gap reports. Are these the only interactions that you've had with the respondents in the last 2 years?
To the best of my memory, like I said, I might have not written it down on a few occasions, whether it was I was in a hurry or whatnot, but that's approximately.
Let me ask you then, the video we watched, you testified earlier that that was in the, I think you said the late summer of 2014.
For the summer.
Is that in the gap reports the ones that we've discussed today that we've marked as Exhibit 2?
The gap report, it's already stipulated the gap report only covers March to August of 2015. So how could a video from 2014 be included there?
If you'd like to stipulate that the gap reports are not comprehensive of all the interactions she's had, I would agree to that.
I would absolutely stipulate that the gap reports are only intended to cover the period of March to August 2015.
Thank you. You were asked about to name a specific number of times that this has happened. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
I think I asked, as I recall, I asked her how many times she had an interaction with Mr. Freeman.
I think that was the specific question.
I didn't ask about in terms of Mr. Ian. I didn't ask for an overall number.
I think that's fair.
Do these interactions have a cumulative effect on you?
How do you mean?
Do they build up over time?
Yes.
Are the notes on the gap report indicative of negative interactions that you've had with Mr. Ian?
Yes.
I'm just going to ask you two more questions about the video, and then we'll be done with you, Lynn, for the day. Attorney Meyer was asking you about distances and where Mr. Freeman was at certain times in that video. Do you recall putting your arm up at one point?
Yes.
Was he on the sidewalk at that point?
No, I was on the edge of the sidewalk closer to the grass, so he would have had to been on the grass.
Okay, so we're talking about how wide would you say that distance is, the width of the sidewalk to the grass?
3.5 feet. 4 feet at the most.
So when he was within 3 feet, you felt the need to put your arm up?
Yes.
At some points, he was further back, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Did you feel the need to put your arm up when you had more distance between you?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Further cross-examination?
No, just one question to clarify, and I don't want to rehash this, but the last, Attorney Dietl asked you whether the notes indicated on these reports, indicated your negative interactions, and you answered yes. But do I correctly understand, again, you're shaking your head, but I'm just repeating the testimony, but anyway, that my question is not that, my question is this. Do I correctly understand that during that time frame between, again, March and August of 2015, that every time Mr. Ian or anybody else engaged in Robin Hood activity involving you while you were on duty, that you would fill out those type of handwritten notes?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no more questions.
I have a couple questions. Specifically with regard to Mr. Cleveland. I think you testified that you recalled only one interaction with him one time when you had encountered him from October 1st of 2013 to today. And I think you said it was around some kind of event that you recall?
Convention or something that they hold every, I don't know when that is, what month it is.
What do you recall about Mr. Cleveland's activities on that occasion? What did he do?
Filling meters, and he had others with him and followed me wherever I was going.
Do you recall anything that he said to you?
No, I don't recall.
So other than engaging in Robin Hooding activity generally, you can't recall anything more about his activities?
No.
And with regard to Ms. Ager, you can't recall any interaction with her, period, from October 1st of 2013 to today?
That's correct.
With regard to Mr. Iyer, you cannot recall any interaction with him from October 1st, 2013 to today.
That's correct.
And with regards to Mr. Colson, you cannot recall any interaction with him from October 1st, 2013 to today.
As far as robbing hooding, that's correct.
And nothing that was at all bothersome to you from October 1st, 2013 to today involving Mr. Colson?
That's correct.
Any further questions for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
No.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Does the plaintiff have any additional witnesses?
We'd like to call Jane McDermott. Thank you, ma'am. Jane, if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Be seated. Could you please state your name for the record and spell it?
What was that?
Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
It's Jane McDermott, McDermott.
And as I asked Lynn at the beginning of her direct, can you just briefly refresh for the court what you do for the city of Keene?
I'm a parking enforcement officer, and I enforce the parking regulations.
So Jane, you were here for all of Lynn's testimony today?
Yes.
Are her experiences similar to what you're still experiencing?
Yes.
Since our prior hearings in October 2013, are you still being followed?
Yes.
And how often would you say?
Daily.
And who's doing it?
Garret.
Are you being followed in crosswalks still?
Yes.
Are you still being taunted?
Yes.
I take it you're still being followed on foot as well?
Yes.
What about being followed by a car?
No, well, we don't use our vehicles like we used to because now we're centralized downtown. Before we were at the police station, so we use the vehicles and get followed. There are occasions where I'm using the vehicle to do what we have, it's called a survey, where we count vehicles that are in parking areas, where Mr. Ian will sometimes follow me on his bicycle, which is a little unnerving because I'm always afraid I'm gonna not see him, or because when you're driving through downtown, you're limited as to how fast you can go, obviously, because you have to stop to let people cross the road and stuff, and the bicycle can get pretty close to the vehicle. And so it's just a little unnerving if I'm going to take a corner and not see him if he's, in a blind spot.
So you're worried about safety?
Mm-hmm.
Are you still being filmed?
Not that I know of. I mean, he's usually always has a camera. I never know when it's on.
You just assume you're being filmed?
I just assume that all the time I'm being filmed. When it's, if Mr. Freeman is around, I know that there's a video, because he always carries the camera and likes to hear himself talk on it, so he's always filming.
I take it this filming occurs on the street when you're walking?
Yes.
Have you ever been filmed from a car?
There has been times I've been filmed from their vehicle, and it was when there was back when there was a TV show that was being done, and I don't remember what it was, or if it was a documentary or something, but there was a film crew down here, and there was a car that stopped while I was writing a ticket with the camera on me from the vehicle that stopped right in the middle of Main Street. I can't tell you who was in the vehicle and who was behind the camera.
Your Honor, when I began my cross-examination of the prior witness, the court appropriately noted that the questioning should be limited to the period after October 2013. It's not clear to me that all of these questions contain that limitation or not. Perhaps that's what has been intended, but I just would like to have that clarified.
That's how I was construing it based on how Attorney Dietel started the questioning. It seemed to be focused on the period of time from October 1st. I agree some of the subsequent questions didn't reference that time frame, but I take it, Mr. McDermott, that your testimony this morning has been with regards to the time period from October 1st, 2013 to the present.
Yes.
That was my intent, Your Honor. Do you find these interactions to be bothersome?
Yes.
To your duties as a parking enforcement officer?
Yes.
To your safety?
Your Honor, again, these questions are leading.
I think if you could ask her to specifically describe, more generally than I understand what you're doing, but perhaps you could have her describe the interactions that concern her that might be done in a non-leading fashion.
Let me ask you this. Could you explain why you find them bothersome?
Well, basically, I'm being harassed and bullied and stalked on a daily basis while I'm at work.
Are there people other than Mr. Ian or Mr. Freeman that have been doing what we've been calling Robin Hooding over the past 2 years?
Well, there have been, but they're not named in this case.
You're not what?
They're not in this case. They're
Not named in the case.
They're not named in this case, but there are others.
Do you think they're working with or for Mr. Ian or Mr. Freeman?
Oh, I know they are, yes.
And how do you know that?
Well, Garret makes a statement a lot about how this is his job. He gets paid to do Robin Hooding, and there'll be times when he has other people with him and he'll initiate the we're doing our job type of thing. So, and the Robin Hood group is Free Keene, and there's a lot of Free Keene members. So those members come out and do Robin Hooding. It's not just the ones named in this case, but since then there's more that come out. And there are some young people that are mentally challenged that they exploit and train how to do Robin Hooding, and they'll bring them out.
The people that you're describing, and I'm not talking about the most recent reference to generally, do you see them doing this with Mr. Ian, the Robin Hooding?
Yes.
Okay. Did you hear Attorney Meyer ask Lynn about whether Garret Ian walks in front of her or behind her?
Yes.
In your experience, does he do both?
Yes. If we change directions, then of course he's following us. So we always refer to it as following because he's always in the general area that we are. And if we change directions to make, a different direction, even going down alleys and places where there's no meters, then he's behind us.
Do you try and avoid him?
Yes.
Do you ever have to slow up and stop what you're doing because
I
he's
do.
in front of you?
I do sometimes just to stop and let him try to get him to just go off and leave me alone. He can Robin Hood without following me around, but he chooses not to do so.
Is it the proximity that bothers you? Meaning how close he gets to you?
It's just been for so long that there is no distance that makes me feel good. I just want them gone.
Would some distance help, though?
Yes.
Does the public complain to you about any of the respondents?
Quite frequently, yes.
Do you get support from the public?
Mm-hmm.
Any criticism from the public?
Not much. Every once in a while you get somebody, but that's very rare. It's mostly people that have been following the case, people that live here and will come up and apologize for them and for what we're going through.
I'm going to ask you about your previous testimony briefly, but I want you to bring it current to the events from October 2013 forward. You previously testified that the events leading up to our prior hearings have caused you a great deal of stress and anxiety. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Based on what's occurred since those hearings, do you still feel that way?
Yes.
Can you tell me why?
Why I feel anxious?
In your own words.
Well, there's been instances where just people in the general public, they'll either be coming up behind me like jogging or something, and it causes me to be startled because I'm thinking it's one of them running up on me. Garret likes to ride his bicycle on the sidewalk, so there'll be people coming up behind me on a bicycle at different times, and I'm immediately thinking that it's him. It's like a PTSD thing. You know, you're always expecting somebody to run up on you and be there.
Does the frequency with which you've been interacting with Mr. Ian over the past several years, is that what leads to that feeling?
Well, not just him, but yes.
If I may approach, Your Honor.
No problem. Attorney Dito, you don't need to. I can follow along from the discussion. I appreciate that, though.
Thank you, Your Honor. Jane, do you have any specific recollection right now of March 15th, 2015? You don't have to look at the document. Do you remember March 15th, 2015?
Yes.
Do you recall encountering any of the respondents on March 15th, 2015?
Yes.
And what happened?
Well, Garret came out quite often and looked like he pretty much was with me throughout the day.
So you were being followed by Garret throughout the day, that's your recollection?
Yes.
Wait.
I'm not asking about a specific document, I'm asking her if she
No, but
recalls being...
she's looking at the document as far as I can tell.
Same one you have.
Okay. I'm sorry, with the objection.
Well, the witness is looking at a document while she's being asked these questions. If she's going to be asked a question based upon recollection without, you shouldn't have the document in front of her.
I understand.
So
Sustained.
give her the document, and then you ask her what she can recall, and she's reading the document.
Okay.
Would it be helpful to look at the document to refresh your recollection?
Yes, because that's...
Plus, the document doesn't even
that-
refer to March 15th. It starts on...
I'm sorry, I misspoke.
So I mean, the whole question is about a particular day.
May.
Which never happened.
Okay, I take it that this is just, that this was a mistake, that actually the reference should have been to May 15th of 2015. Not a problem, but we'll just, so I take it when you're talking about March 15th, you actually meant May 15th. Okay.
Right,
The objection's well taken. You can ask her a question if she remembers. That's fine. If she doesn't remember, she can use the document if it would be helpful to refresh her recollection.
But again, the other thing is he's asking her about a date, and then she's looking at the document, and then he's asking her questions. It seems to me the better way here would be to lay a foundation and ask what recollection she has of these days generally, and to what extent she needs this to assist her memory.
That might be helpful.
I'm happy to phrase the questions in that manner. Jane, do you have a recollection of her seeing the respondents on May 20th, 2015?
Well, I don't without looking. I have to look because the days all run together.
I think I can shortcut this. I take it that you don't have specific memory of what occurred on certain dates, but it might be helpful for you to look at the document to refresh your memory as to what dates you may have had some interaction with some of the respondents.
Right. It's because it's every day, so they all run together. I don't know that the memory that I have is on that specific date without looking here because I've noted it.
So it would be helpful to, just to clarify, it'd be helpful for you to refresh your recollection by looking at the document we marked as Exhibit 3. With that in mind, I'm going to ask you specific dates, and to the extent you need to look at the document to refresh your recollection, please do so.
Okay.
Do you recall seeing the respondents on May 21st, 2015?
Yes.
Can you just speak up just a little bit, Jane?
Yes.
Thank you. And do you recall how long you saw them that day?
Well, I don't recall, but I have written here that it was from 9:40 to noon in the morning, and from 15:20 to 15:35 in the afternoon.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on May 22nd, 2015?
Yes.
And could you identify who?
It was Garret.
And do you recall how long you saw him that day?
I first encountered him at 11:11, I think it says, yep. And then from 12 to 12:50. We're on the 22nd, right?
That's correct.
And then again, 1400 to 1440.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on May 23rd, 2015?
Garret.
And for about how long do you recall?
Looks like it was a half an hour around noon to 12:30, and then an hour in the afternoon.
So let's talk about that day. After you see Garret in the morning, are you worried that he's going to pop up in the afternoon?
Wait, she's already testified that she doesn't have well, maybe she hasn't, but she hasn't been asked whether she has any recollection of that particular date, aside from what's contained in this document. There's no foundation.
Maybe you can lay some foundation if she remembers what happened.
Now that you've looked at your notes from that day, do you have a better memory of what happened on May 23rd, 2015?
It's not any different than any other day, but yes, on this particular day, he came out in the morning and then he came out again in the afternoon.
So with that memory in mind, after he came out in the morning, were you concerned that you would see him again during the day?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any sense, on these days that we've talked about where you see Mr. Ian, do you have any way of knowing what time he's going to start following you?
No.
Does that in and of itself cause you anxiety?
Yeah, because you're always looking, you're always wondering if one of them is going to pop up somewhere. Most of the time it's him.
On May 27th, 2015, do you recall seeing any of the respondents?
It was Garret and Mariah, which is the person that Lynn referred to as the girl with the pink hair.
Do you know Mariah beyond that?
Well, there's a story that goes with Mariah that kind of goes into my personal life, but I know who she is only because she was an acquaintance of my daughter many years ago, so that's how I know her name.
Do you know if she's associated with Mr. Ian or Mr. Freeman in any way?
She was dating Garret. I don't know if she still is anymore.
And what we've described as Robin Hooding, was she also engaged in that with Mr. Ian?
Yes.
On May 27th?
Yes.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on May 28th, 2015?
Garret.
And for what period of time do you recall?
Well, I just have it written at 1:30
The
on.
recall
so-
is not correct here, because she's just referring to what she has in there. You've already laid a foundation that she doesn't remember, so she's just reading from this form.
Your Honor, I'm happy to have Jane look at these notes and use these globally to refresh her recollection, and I can ask her about them directly, or if Attorney Meyer would prefer and the court would prefer, I'm happy to ask her first if she has a specific recollection and then look at the documents.
I think the objection was just, do you have a specific memory of what time, do you recall, without looking at the document, what time on the 28th?
I wouldn't be able to say it was that specific date without looking, only because it's every day.
Having
so.
looked at the document, does that refresh your recollection?
It does. It does, because I made a note of my day, and I can see what happened that day, and then I remember that Garret was out there from 1:30 until the end of my day.
So Jane, we're going to go through, this won't take too much longer, but the rest of the time period from what you've just described is May 28th, or May 27th, through as current as we can go to today's hearing. So when I ask you questions, if you'd start by referring to whether or not this is your recollection, and if you need to refresh by looking at the document, we would just say that you're looking at the document. Thank you. So, and I apologize if I asked you about May 28th, but do you have a recollection of seeing any of the respondents on May 28th?
Garret.
And when do you recall seeing him?
Then I'd have to look at my document.
Based on the document, when do you, based on does looking at the document help refresh your recollection?
And it was 1:30 until the end of my day.
You recall seeing any of the respondents on May 30th, 2015?
Garret.
Do you recall when?
And I have to look. Garret was there from 13:30 to 13:50, 14:30 to 14:50. Again, I saw him briefly at 1500.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on June 10th, 2015?
Not without looking. It was Garret and Mariah.
Do you recall if you had to dodge or evade Garret that day?
I always dodge and evade Garret, or try to. I try to lose him as much as I possibly can so I don't have to deal with him.
On June 11th, 2015, do you recall seeing any of the respondents?
Looking at my notes,
So,
in the afternoon, Garret and Mariah.
do you recall if you saw Ian Freeman on June 11th?
I don't recall, but I see that I had made notes, that there was others that I didn't know with Garret, but now that I think of it, I remember that day. They were in the common, and Ian and Renee walked across the street, and of course Ian started filming, and Garret and Mariah were following me, so he was trying to film the Robin Hooding, I guess.
When this was going on, are you able to focus on doing your job?
No.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on June 17th, 2015?
Not without looking. What day were you asking?
June 17th.
17th. Was Garret, 12:10 to 12:40. Garret again in the afternoon, 13:41.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on June 18th, 2015?
That particular day, the NBC was doing a, they were doing I don't know if it was a piece on Free Keene or whatever, but on that day I got all of them with the news crew at the same time running after me.
So let's talk about that day then. Could you describe in more detail what happened?
Well, I was in the center of Main Street, and I was writing a ticket, and I could see the crew of the Free Keene group walking across the street with the news crew. One of the newsmen hollered and pointed, there's one of them right now, and they all began to run toward me. So I immediately left the center and went toward City Hall.
Who's when you say all of them? Who's all?
It was a whole group of them. There was Ian and Garret. I believe even James Cleveland was with them that day.
You feel targeted?
Yes. That day I had all of them running toward me was very intimidating.
Let's talk about the next day, June 19th, 2015. Do you recall seeing any of the respondents that day?
Just by looking at my document, it was Garret in the afternoon, 11:30 to 12. And Garret, 12:40. And then I wrote still Garret, and with an arrow from 13:16 until the end of the day.
Do you recall seeing any of the respondents on June 20th, 2015?
Again, I have to look because the days all run together. Garret in the afternoon at 1 o'clock, and then I wrote I lost him in 13:50.
What do you mean by you lost him?
I was able to change my direction and shake him off, so he was no longer with me. He went in his own way.
On July 2nd, 2015, do you recall seeing any of the respondents?
Garret, 14:05.
On July 10th, 2015, do you recall seeing any of the respondents?
This afternoon, it's coming back to me. This afternoon, I actually had to call into the office this particular day because Garret was putting money in meters of cars that had tickets on them. And I do that. I call the office so that they can put it on a calendar in case citizens call and complain that they've received a ticket with time on the meter, and then the supervisor can look and see on the calendar that the activists were out and this is what they did. So yes, Garret was out that day. I remember that day.
Do you recall his presence as being a nuisance?
Garret's always a nuisance. But I was chalking cars that day. It looks like mostly I was on Court Street, but when I'm chalking, there really isn't. He can't ticket because I'm leaving chalk marks, so it has nothing to do with the meters. So he's a nuisance because he's still following me, but he's not saving anybody from tickets because it's not relevant to the job that I'm doing at that point. And so, yes, it's very much a nuisance.
If he can't ticket you, if he can't
save
tickets at that time, based on your observations, what do you think he's doing?
Being a nuisance.
Sustained. She can describe what she observes, but I think the question was really asking her to comment on what his intent was. She can describe the physical actions that she sees or any words that she hears him say, but not on what his state of mind was. So what did you physically see?
So, on days like this where I'm talking, which we don't do as much anymore because we don't have the third person, but anyway, on days that I'm talking and Garret comes up, he's usually got his camera and he's usually doing his own documentary of what I'm doing, and no, he can't save anybody, so I don't really pay attention to what he's saying, but he does his own little commentary into his camera about us chalking cars. And
on July 11th, 2015, do you recall seeing any of the respondents that day?
Looks like the 10th was a long day. The 11th is Garret in the afternoon, 14:02.
On July 15th, 2015, do you recall seeing any of the respondents that day?
July what?
July 15th.
I think some of these were mixed up. Garret came out after I came back from lunch that day and was there from 12:50. Looks like till the end of my day, it looks like. Or, no, I guess until 14:13. Looks like that's where it ended.
On July 25th, 2015, do you recall seeing any of the respondents that day?
Garret in the afternoon, 13:51.
These notations reflect negative interactions with Mr. Ian.
Yes, they're all negative.
Before we discuss this gap report, Your Honor, at this time, since these documents have been used to refresh your recollection, I'd like to ask that what's been marked as Exhibit 3 be entered as a full exhibit.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Plaintiff's Exhibit 3 is a full exhibit.
Jane, I was asking you before we got into this discussion about feelings of stress and anxiety. Have you sought any additional counseling or help since October 2013?
Yes, we have. We actually have an organization, I guess the city has, that we can reach out to mental health workers, and I did that, and then went and saw somebody on my own for a little while and was put on some medication.
You previously testified in 2013, and again, I want to ask you about this from the period since October 2013 forward, that you were looking for another job because you were thinking about quitting. Have you still been having those thoughts?
Occasionally I do.
Would you feel safer if you knew that there was some distance that was going to be preserved between you and Mr. Ian?
Objection, leading.
Overruled. You can answer the question.
Not just Mr. Ian, all of them. Because you never know when somebody else is going to come out. It's not just him, but yes, any relief would be helpful.
Would that help you focus on your job?
That's leaving, sustained.
Based on your personal observations over the last several years, do you think the respondent's conduct is going to continue if there's no injunction?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would ask I would ask the answer be stricken. I mean, what
sustained and stricken. That's I don't know how. I mean, certainly that's a conclusion you can ask the court to draw from the conduct. I don't know how somebody. I mean, I understand that I understand the purpose, but really it's well, I'm not going to allow it. Sustained.
If I may rephrase the question, Your Honor.
Yes.
Are you afraid that the conduct will continue?
Yes.
I have no more questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. McDermott, again, my name is Jon Meyer, and I represent the defendants in this case. What is your, what has been your schedule over the last year?
I generally work Wednesday through Saturday, 9 to 5:30.
Essentially 4 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and you fill out a overtime gap report every day.
Mm-hmm.
Again, is that clear? Just for the record, is that a yes?
Sorry, yes.
And if there's any unusual occurrences or anything beyond the norm, you make a note on this report?
Not just abnormal occurrences. That this is basically for a record of our day, because there's some days that we have certain things that we have to do, and so we put that on the gap report so that our supervisor knows, like if we're repairing a meter or we're doing the survey or we're collecting, they know what we were doing in that period of time. So it's not just the interaction with them.
Is it correct that every date upon which you're working, in which you have contact with Robin Hood activity, you would make a notation in the report?
Yes.
And is it correct that if there was anything, you know, beyond sort of the routine Robin Hood activity, you would make a notation on this report?
Yes.
So in terms of all the days in which we have not been provided copies of your report, is it fair to say that on those days no Robin Hood activity occurred, at least
no.
The contact with you?
No.
It's not fair.
That's.
Well, are you saying there are other reports which we've not received in which you've noted Robin Hood activity?
I think from the date that they were requested is what you have there. We still have, I mean, there's been other ones since then that we've done. Those were, I think, basically used for, so that you would have some idea or so that you would have some idea that it's still happening.
Well, in your case, the reports that we've been provided are the reports from May 15th, or, well, the dates covered are from May 15th to July 15th. Now, let me just ask you about that time period. Is it fair to say that any days during that time period in which there's not a officer gap report as part of any of your work days in that time period in which there's not an officer time gap report in Exhibit 3, then those days you had no contact?
I'm not sure what you're saying within this time period?
Yes.
That if there's a time period in here that you don't have, would there
or you don't have either, because we have the same exhibits in front of us, yes.
Right, but I'm trying to understand what you're asking me.
I think you're accurately understanding it.
Okay, well, no, it's not necessarily that they didn't bother me that day, but most of the time, like I could have been busy, I could have had trouble at the end of the day getting the thing to download, so I may not have made the notation on that particular day.
Well, you earlier testified that every time it occurred, you made a notation.
Every time that was a reasonable, if I had the ability to make the notation. I may not have had the ability to make the notation, or it may not have been more than 5 minutes. If I see him for 5 minutes, I'm not going to write it down. It has to be that he's interacted with me for
Now
I might lose him.
You testified on your direct examination that Mr. Ian taunted you.
What? I'm sorry.
Taunted you, yes. What did he say to you?
On what date?
On any date. In this time frame. We're talking
well, this is in general.
We're talking about since October 2013. What has he said to you that you object to?
If there is any conversation at all, I object to it. And to me, it's taunting. Anything that comes out of his mouth is taunting.
So no matter what he says to you, it's considered taunting?
Correct.
So if he made a comment to you about the weather, that would be considered taunting?
Well, he doesn't talk to me about the weather.
If he did, you would consider that taunting?
Coming from him, yes.
Now, you testified in direct examination that there were others, and that these others were working for Mr. Freeman and Mr. Ayers. When other people participated in the Robin Hood activity, did you make a note of that on your officer time gap report?
I don't know that I did. I sometimes have had a couple of kind of interactions that were aggressive, and on those days I didn't necessarily put it on here. I did an email to my supervisor.
You emailed to your supervisor?
Yes, if I had an encounter. I've had two that I remember quite well that were pretty aggressive.
This is since October 2013?
Yes, this was just recently.
And these involved persons other than Mr.
There weren't people that were named in this.
So twice recently you had interactions with people who are not named as defendants in this case?
Correct.
And when did those interactions occur?
April 11th was one, and I don't know the specific date, but it was just a couple weeks ago was a second.
And
two different people.
So we are in, so let me just understand that. One is April 11th, 2015, and the other was, you said?
Just a couple weeks ago.
So sometime in September of 2015.
Yes.
So, and you said that you sent out emails about those?
Yes, I gave my supervisor, I either emailed her or I went in and saw her. I went off the street and saw her and talked to her about it.
And why, and are those the only two occasions in which you've emailed her Robin Hood activities since at least October 2013?
Rephrase that?
Are those the only two situations in which you've emailed her about Robin Hood activity since October 2000?
Yes, those would have been the only ones that she would have gotten an email on because they were aggressive.
And so let's start with the first of those two incidents, which occurred, you said, in April 11th, 2015. Okay. Now, what happened on April 11th, 2015?
There was a free keener that came out into the, well, I believe it was a Saturday, and he came out and just started yelling at me about stuff that I have no idea what he was talking about, and he continued to yell at me, and then so I decided to, Garret was out there late in part of that day. But I went into the back of the building of City Hall, and of course on Saturday it's locked, so I had to go up and unlock the door, and this person charged up onto the steps like he was going to grab the door as I opened it. But I got inside and closed the door and proceeded to just take a break and give myself some distance from this person.
Now, what was the name of this person?
JP is what I know him as.
I take it he's not one of the defendants in this action?
Correct. I stated that.
And did you sent an email to your supervisor?
I either sent her an email or I spoke to her about it. I don't remember which. It was just a different kind of an event, so I didn't feel it needed to be on my GAP report.
When you say it was a different kind of event, what do you mean?
Well, because I actually feared for my safety at that point. I really feared for my safety because I didn't know this person. I didn't know their stability. I don't know the free Keeners either, but they haven't actually been physically violent.
Have you had any other interactions with this individual?
I don't believe so. There's been a few other times that I've seen him out on the streets, and there was one where I actually approached him when he made a comment as I walked by him, but that was after the April 11th event.
What comment did he make?
He made a comment as I was walking by Railroad Square, that it must be nice that we can walk around with our telephones, and because I'm looking at my phone as I'm walking through, because we have Park Mobile, and I have to look to see if people have paid, because there may be meters that are blinking, but the person has actually paid for parking through the Park Mobile. And I walked over and showed him my telephone and said, I'm looking at Park Mobile, I'm doing my job, and I kept going.
So I understand that even though you were intimidated, I think as you described it on April 11th, you felt comfortable enough with him to approach him and have this subsequent interaction.
I didn't feel comfortable enough, but there are times when you just, you've had enough. You just proving to him that I'm doing my job. I'm not Facebooking.
All right, so that's the incident of April 11th. Now, you said another one occurred more, well, let me just ask you this. In terms of this gentleman yelling at you, and you said charging up the stairs after you, was he yelling by himself? Was there a group of people yelling, just him yelling?
He was just him yelling.
And when he charged up the stairs, were there a group of people charging up or just him?
It was just him.
Now, you've described a more recent event that occurred earlier early September this year.
Yeah, and that person I do not know by name, but he was just yelling obscenities, and Robin Hooding.
Now, was he doing that by himself or with others?
Well, he was by himself, but he was talking to somebody in a vehicle. It was down by the public library.
All right. Did you see the person in the vehicle?
I saw them. It was an older man.
Was the person you saw in the vehicle any of the defendants in this case?
No.
I take it the person who was yelling to you was not any of the defendants in the case?
No.
Now, he was yelling obscenities at you, and what did you do about that?
I didn't do anything.
Well, we know at least you sent an email.
Oh, you mean after I left the street that day?
Did that lead you to leave your station or not? Just ignore him? Did you keep on?
Yeah, I didn't leave. I just kept going, and I changed my direction, and that was the end of that.
How long did that interaction last?
Oh, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, because I went inside the library.
Now, have you, at least since October 2013, had any interactions with Mr. Colson?
Not Robin Hooding wise, no.
Have you had any interactions with Mr. Cleveland?
No.
Have you had any interactions with Ms. Ayer?
No.
Sorry, Kate Ager. Have you had any interactions with Mr. Ager?
No.
Have you had any interactions with Mr. Ayer?
No.
Now, I think you covered this before, but have you had any interactions with Mr. Freeman?
There's just been a couple of occasions from the last.
And the couple of interactions with Mr. Freeman, what have they involved?
There was one day when I was walking down Main Street, and I believe he was at the bagel shop at the end of the street where you can eat outside. And he stood up as I walked by and got in front of me and pulled out his camera and just began Robin Hooding and told me he was going to see some candidate that was talking, and he said, so I won't be bothering you very long, and then I'm going to go bother them.
So for how long did he film you?
Well, he Robin Hood and filmed me. So, but it was probably, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes, 10 minutes.
And when you say when he Robin Hooded and filmed you, what you mean by Robin Hooded, I take it, is that he put quarters into the meters that you were about to ticket?
Yeah, and filmed.
Right. Now, is it fair to say to engage in Robin Hood activity, whether it's Mr. Freeman or anybody else, they ultimately have to end up in front of you?
Yes, but they're still going in the same direction that we're going in, so we just refer to it as following.
Right. Well, okay, I understand that, but essentially, they may need, in order to plug the meter, it may be necessary for them to pass by you from behind to front, correct? Mm-hmm. In other words, they may be watching where you are from behind, see where you're going, and then they have to walk past you to get to the meters.
They run past us, but yes.
And if they're running, the reason they're running is they need to get to the meter before you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You described going to counseling, is that correct?
Yes.
And putting aside any issues you may have at work, is it fair to say that you also have other stressors in your life?
Is it fair what?
Accurate that you have other stressors in your life?
I don't have many.
You don't have many? No, I didn't ask you if you had many. I asked you if you had any others.
No.
Other stressors except work?
Yes.
Do you happen to have copies of the emails that you sent to your supervisor about the two incidents you've described?
No, I don't. And like I said, I'm not positive that I might have talked to her face to face. I don't remember. I remember the event, but I don't remember because in the past, it's things that I have done, either sent her an email or talked to her, and I don't remember this particular time which I used, if I wrote her an email or if I spoke with her.
am I correct in understanding that, and again, we don't know whether you did email, but assuming that there were no other incidents that have occurred since October 2013 which have occasioned you to email your supervisor? At least no other incidents relating to, even broadly speaking, Robin Hood activity.
No.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's accurate, yeah.
And is it fair to say that those were the two most upsetting incidents that have occurred to you since October 2013?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you.
Any additional witnesses for the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. I don't know if, are there going to be any witnesses for the respondents?
There are, Your Honor.
Okay, why don't we take our lunch break now? We'll resume at 1 o'clock. And I'm going to need everybody can certainly leave their things here. I have the representative from the AOC who's coming to look at the courtroom on some issues, so I'm going to have to clear the courtroom probably in about 5 minutes, but you can certainly leave all of your materials. We have no other matters before the court today.
Can I just say that
yes,
just in our discussions about this hearing, we have two witnesses to call. I'm not anticipating that those witnesses are going to take certainly the whole afternoon. I don't know the length of the cross-examination, but I wouldn't expect that. What we would like to do, though, at least from my point of view, and I think counsel for the plaintiff are in agreement, is that, I mean, we should certainly finish the evidentiary hearing today. We're not going to need another day to do that. What we would like to do is an opportunity to sort of give you some sort of written brief and possibly oral argument after today, so you can have essentially give a chance just for review with you the sort of any intervening legal authority and so on, but not needing the day all today, the rest of today or next week for further testimony.
Your Honor, we're generally in agreement. I would just ask for 2 or 3 minutes at the end of the day to just wrap up where we are.
I think that's fine, and that's not going to preclude anyone from submitting legal memos. We do have most of the day next Friday is set aside. There are a few matters early in the morning. I don't know if that's going to be sufficient time to do the legal memos, but if you want to set aside whatever period of time that you would need for oral argument that day, we can certainly accommodate that. So that's, I don't know if that's going to be sufficient time on the legal memos, but why don't we address exactly where we are? I'm certainly happy to set aside whatever time we need to do that next week.
We'll talk over lunch.
So do you want, in light of that, does an hour for lunch make sense? Do you want a little bit more time to look at the documents that were just produced?
I think, I mean, I don't want to move my car so I don't get another ticket. Aside from that, I don't think we need more than an hour.
I think you've occupied the people who might be doing that.
I was thinking that whether there was a relative a clemency provision here or something.
Yeah, an hour is fine with us, Your Honor. Thank you.
They're out looking for your car right now.
Your Honor, maybe it's like 5 to.
Why don't we start at 1:15?
Fine, thank you.
Give everybody a little longer. Thank you all.
right.
Good afternoon, please have a seat. If I could see counsel at the bench briefly.
Your Honor, the defendants call as their first witness Garret Ian. Garret, will you please raise your right hand? You swear, affirm, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I affirm.
Thank you. You may be seated. You state for the record, please, your full name and your current address.
My name is Garret Ian. Last name is spelled E-A-N, and I currently reside at 17 Gardner Street in Keene, New Hampshire.
I'm going to ask you some questions, and all of those, could you, in responding to those questions, please consider them as being limited to events occurring on or after October 2013, unless I explicitly say otherwise.
Okay.
Now, in regard to, you aren't a defendant in this case. You have, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You have and are engaging in Robin Hood activity, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, from the time frame of 2013 on, approximately with what frequency have you engaged in that?
If I go out, maybe I'm out 3 or 4 days per the week, and I'll be out maybe 3 to 4 hours per day.
Now, has your Robin Hood activity, frequency, infrequency of it, and I take it it's waxed and waned over time?
Sure, you could say that.
But has any frequency, the relative frequency or infrequency of it, in any way been affected by any action taken by this court or the New Hampshire Supreme Court?
No.
Now, in regard to the Robin Hood activity, and again, I'm talking now about over the last 2 years, can you describe in general your physical location vis-a-vis the parking enforcement officers as you engage in that activity?
Sure. If I go out, generally I won't begin filling meters until I find the parking enforcer, because otherwise I could potentially be wasting money. But when I do find them, if I do spot them somewhere, I'll try and fill what empty meters I see in the distance between myself and them, and then upon catching up to them, I'll try to get ahead of them. I try and give the parking enforcer the whole breadth of the sidewalk, not to interfere with their personal space. And for the most part, I'm not interacting with them verbally, and usually they're not interacting with me either.
Typically, are you behind them or in front of them?
The ideal location to be for the activity is in front, so that they're not able to approach any meters that are expired and write a ticket. But of course, if they change their direction immediately while you were several feet in front of somebody, now you're quite a large distance behind them if they change direction or if they go down an alley, etc.
So if you're in front of them, you turn around and they're suddenly going off another direction, what do you do?
I'll generally try to follow them if it seems that they're going towards meters that may still be expired. If I've cleared that area, if I know that I've just come from there and those meters are good, then I'll generally go to a different location and see if I can spot where it is they might next go to.
Typically, how far away are you from them?
Generally 4 to 5 car lengths. I'm not sure what that locates or calculates out to in distance, but if the parking enforcers, if they're able to spot an expired meter from where they are, they're going to write it even if I get to it in time, so that further incentivizes me to be a little bit further out.
Now, if this court were to adopt the request of the city of Keene and issue an injunction, prohibit you from being within 10 feet of a parking enforcement officer, how, if at all, would that affect the work you're doing?
That would not enable me to cross them on the sidewalk, I believe. I think it may require me to step out into the road to retain that distance if they are asking for 10 feet. So I see that as a safety threat for myself. I don't really want to be walking in the road any more than I have to. But otherwise, I don't understand, or I'm not aware of any sort of proximity issue that's been raised in the time frame you've asked about from either enforcer. I've been asked to stop talking and to stop stalking, but nothing has been told to me about like being physically close to somebody.
When you described a situation where you're in front of them, they shift direction and you have to go past them to get between them and the next set of parking meters. When you pass them, are you typically within 10 feet of them?
Probably at the moment you're passing them, yeah, you probably come within about 10 feet.
For how long a time frame are you then in that proximity?
2 to 4 seconds, maybe. It's depending on the speed that you're going versus how fast they're going. I generally am not running. I may just like walk quickly, but so yeah, depending on how quickly the parking enforcer is walking too.
Now, in terms of the Robin Hood activity, are you typically doing it yourself or as part of it? And again, just since October of 2013, are you typically doing it yourself or as part of a group?
It's mostly been myself. I'd say 9 times out of 10. Occasionally, someone will express interest and want to come out, and there have been people that have visited Keene wanting to come Robin Hooding, so I've brought them out. And also, my girlfriend was involved in that activity for a while too. It's been a while since she's been out. So yeah, that's been the extent of it. I'd say is I think the biggest group I've had, you could say, over that period of time is 2 people, maybe 3, that were either Robin Hooding or interested in observing it. The exceptions, I'd say, would be when the film crews were in town, as was pointed out, that like the film crews were acting independently of what we were doing on certain days, but also interviewed us at some times.
Now, there's been a claim that parking enforcement officers have been circled or otherwise obstructed in their movements. And again, we're talking now since October 2013. Have you ever intentionally gotten in their way?
No, I've never intentionally obstructed anybody I can think of, civilian or parking enforcer, while I've been out.
Have you ever participated in a situation where the parking enforcement officers were surrounded or circled by multiple people?
No. There have been times when, like for example, when the film crew was in town, they were relative strangers to me. They were just people that were interested in observing what we were doing and asking us about it, and also asking the parking enforcers. They got somewhat close to the parking enforcers. I don't think there's anything necessarily illegal or threatening inherently about that, but because I saw them doing that, I did decide to stay a little bit back, because I know the parking enforcers do get nervous about people asking them questions being filmed close proximity.
And the film crew was there for 1 day, do I understand that correctly?
Well, there's been a number of film crews. NBC was one of the larger ones that came. There was also I think Country Music Television crew that came, and was maybe 3 or 4 people. I don't know if they interacted with the parking enforcers or not. And I think there may have been like a WBIN, or maybe it was MUR, was in town 1 day, but I didn't myself observe them interacting with parking enforcers per se.
Now, there was testimony earlier about a Free Keene intervention. What's the actual name?
I believe the parking enforcers were referring to an event called Keenevention. V-E-T-I-O-N? Keene, and then V-E-N-T-I-O-N, Keenevention.
And what is that event?
It's an event that's hosted, I believe, by Ian Freeman. He's, I believe, like the head organizer of the event. And it goes on at the Best Western here in Keene. In past years, I've been associated with it. I spoke at it last year. That was the only year I've attended, but I won't necessarily be attending this year. But if people want to go Robin Hooding during that event, I will be in town for that.
Is it like, is the word vention sort of a takeoff on the word convention?
I presume so. I didn't come up with it, so I couldn't. That would be just speculation on my part.
Now, more broadly, there's been some references to Free Keene. What is Free Keene?
Free Keene is...
I'm going to object, Your Honor. This is beyond the scope of today's hearing. We've already been through this last hearing.
How does this relate to, didn't we cover this, and I actually can't recall, wasn't there some discussion about what Free Keene means the last hearing?
Right, which I'm not about to ask. But the reason why this is not only relevant but actually important is that one of the crucial issues here, I mean, given the fact that, you know, most of the defendants are no longer engaged in this and that most of the complaints are being made about people who aren't even defendants, the inference being drawn through some of the parking enforcement officer testimony was that my clients were responsible, directed, employed, utilized other people essentially at their behest. And I mean, that's the only way at this point the requested injunction makes any sense at all. So I think that, and it was a question, they brought in testimony about an alleged mentally challenged girl who was allegedly, I mean, there was a slew of testimony they raised about other people. They raised Free Keene. They claimed people are being paid, employed, directed, etc., all of which is false. But I think it's certainly an important area of testimony in regard to the hearing today. I'm not intending to talk about the political aspect of it. I'm talking about the organizational aspect of it as it applies to what's occurred most particularly in the last 2 years.
As to the scope of that question, as now further explained, the objection's overruled.
Garret, in terms of Free Keene, what is it, and I'm not talking now about ideology, I'm talking about organizationally. What is it organizationally?
It is a blog. It is a place on the internet where different authors can post their opinions, their comments, and as far as I know I'm not doing any editing. It's unedited. The authors have complete creative control on it. And I am one of the authors on Free Keene. Ian Freeman is the person who created the website, and there's a number of other people, some of them live in Keene, some of them do not, who also write on the site, and they're all listed on a little tab up there that says bloggers and shows everyone's name and picture.
Now, does this organization have any officers?
No.
Is there anybody who basically maintains control over the organization?
Well, it being Ian's blog and him hosting the server, I suppose if he was sufficiently offended or wanted to edit content by one of the authors, he could do that. I think maybe he's written about a few times when he has done that. But I don't edit anyone else's content, and nobody has edited mine from there either.
But putting aside the blogging aspect of it and addressing directly Robin Hooding activity, when you yourself perform Robin Hood activity, is that at anybody else's direction or request, or is that your own decision?
It's my decision to go out there and perform this activity.
Have you directed anybody else to engage in Robin Hood activity?
Beyond just offering people dimes who have wanted to participate with me and expressed interest, I haven't given them any sort of other incentives to do so.
Have you ever employed anybody to engage in Robin Hood activity?
No, I have not.
Now, I understand that a woman has participated in some of your Robin Hood activity with you.
Mm-hmm.
And the inference has been made that you and she had or have a personal relationship.
Sure, that was inferred by one of the parking enforcers.
Okay. But in terms of this person who is engaged in Robin Hood activity with you, does she do that because you are requiring or asking her to do it, or is she doing it as her own decision making?
She initially was very interested in the fact that I was out there doing it and wanted to spend time with me out there doing it, so she would be out there doing it with me. There were a few occasions where she actually went out and did it on her own as well, and also shot her own video of her interactions with people.
Now, there's also reference to Free Keene somehow engaging young women who were mentally challenged. To your knowledge, first of all, is there any, are you aware of any of the Free Keene employing, utilizing, or otherwise recruiting anybody with a mental disability of any sex or any age?
I was unsure what that could have possibly been a reference to. I think it could be the case of there are all sorts of people that have opinions about maybe something related to Free Keene, and that's somehow being associated with people associated with Free Keene, but I'm not sure why there would be any impression that people are being exploited, or as was referenced earlier.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Mr. Ian, this term that's been bandied about, Robin Hooding, that includes plugging meters, correct?
That's the primary way that you are effective in Robin Hooding, yes, is to plug meters that otherwise would get a ticket.
You can plug meters being 30 feet away from Jane and Lynn, can't you?
It's possible.
Now, another part of Robin Hooding is that it's basically a protest against government actions, isn't it?
I suppose that's one way of categorizing it.
Okay.
I don't consider it to be a protest per se, though I consider it to be just an effective action. It's you can physically do something just by spending a little bit of money that makes a difference in someone else's day than not getting a ticket. So, I mean, I guess it may have a protest element to it.
Okay. And you can express and participate in this active action against the government 30 feet away from Lynn and Jane, can't you?
Sure.
Another aspect of robbing hooding is videotaping, right?
I suppose yes and no. I mean, I always advocate that when people are doing anything they consider activism related, it's usually a good idea to document as much as possible. But it's not necessarily an element. There are days when I'll go out and I mean, I may film like the first save I get or something, but after that, I don't really need to make any more video. It's just not interesting.
And you can video these saves 30 feet away from Lynn and Jane, can't you?
Sure.
Robin Hooding also has an aspect of trying to engage the public, other people, in discussion and dialogue, correct?
I'm not going out there to personally address anyone necessarily, like in the sense of like trying to engage them like verbally, but I'd say there is the element of, since we're outside in public on one of the most public parts of Keene, that there's an element of it being like an open invitation for people to come up and talk to me about what I'm doing, or maybe like ask questions of the parking enforcer about what's going on. So there's like I'd say yes, a public outreach element, but I'm not directly making outreach to anyone, is what I'm trying to clarify.
And in fact, you have engaged in this public outreach with public citizens about your philosophies more than 30 feet away, haven't you?
Wait, just again, I thought we were dealing with just since October 2015.
We are. That's all my questions are premised on.
No, your questions haven't been limited. You've been asking him generally.
I take it when you're asking the questions you're asking about from October 1st of 2013 to the present.
Thank you, sir.
Could you repeat the question, please?
With that premise, we're only talking about the last 2 years. But you have engaged in discussions with the public about your philosophies, whatever they may be, and you have been able to do that 30 feet away from Lynn and Jane, haven't you?
That's, I have a little difficulty answering the question because I'm not really sure how relative location to the parking enforcer has anything to do with like a conversation I may be having with a third party.
That's my point.
Like I may be having a conversation with a third party and I may stop Robin Hooding and they may walk by, and that's like, you know, I have nothing to do with their location. That's like their freedom to walk past where I happen to be standing or whatever.
So in other words, you can engage with the public about any of your ideas or philosophies or whatever you want to talk about with public people more than 30 feet away from Jane and Linda, can't you?
I imagine that the places you could do that are up to infinite amount of feet away from them, sure.
And one of your goals is really to physically shut down the parking enforcement arm of the government, isn't it? And it has been.
Well, whether they were to actually shut down or whether they just stopped being so exploitative and stopped charging and taxing people at such exponential rates. I mean, because I'd say that's my qualm, is the exponential nature to which people are fined and exploited through that system. So I don't necessarily have the goal of trying to abolish all sorts of parking enforcement. I just have an issue with, and also I feel address the issue by, you know, making a difference for people that is just a small amount of money as opposed to a large amount of loss for them.
Sir, you've testified that the idea that you can physically shut down an enforcement arm of the government, that's a goal to shoot for. You've said that in the past under oath, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay. And doesn't that continue to be?
Wait, Your Honor.
Excuse me, can I get the question?
We'll have the question that then, but I think there might be an objection that was maybe a little late to the last question.
Well, I'd like to link it to my question.
I understand. Would you say the question, then I'll hear Attorney Meyer on the objection.
And the goal that you've testified to of shutting down the government, that's a goal that you've had since in the last 2 years, too, isn't it?
Your Honor, I am objecting on the grounds, primarily on the grounds of relevance in twofold. Primarily, we've dealt with the issue of ideology at the last hearing. As I understand it, the purpose of this hearing is not to readdress what the ideology is or whether the ideology is changed or not changed, but to deal with what's actually occurred on the ground, if anything, that would change this court's analysis of the constitutional issues involved in granting an injunction. And I don't see why going back over what their political goals are has any relevance to what's supposed to be going on in this hearing. And in fact, when Attorney Bauer objected to my talking about raising the free Keene issue, it just seemed, you know, for him now to start sort of talking to Garret about what your political goals are. See, and secondly, if we were to talk about political goals, I take it that Attorney Bauer's point is your stated political objective is different than it was 2 years ago. Even if that's true, so what? And I mean, and we're supposed to be dealing with what they have in what's going on now, not what he testified to 2 years ago as were his political goals and doctrines.
I understand the objection, but for the same reason that I allowed you to ask about free Keene, asking about the political philosophy, I think this is cross-examination. Credibility of witnesses is an issue. I think this is fair game for cross-examination. The objection is overruled.
Thank you. I would also, frankly, Your Honor, I would ask my brother not to make speaking objections.
I think and I was waiting to see, there's a little bit more into substance that I would like to do in open court. So if there's a speaking objection, I'd like to deal with that at the bench. If it's something more, if it's going to get to the substance of what the witness is talking about, for the same reasons I said earlier, I'd rather deal with that at the bench, out of the hearing of the witness directly.
So, Mr. Ian, your goals are the same in the last 2 years today. And they'll be the same tomorrow, won't they? To shut down the government, and particularly shut down the parking enforcement arm of the PEOs. That hasn't changed, has it?
Well, I feel like I need to go through each of those points to say like which would be most effective in which order, whether like shutting down parking enforcement before the government.
Let me make it simple. Your goals haven't changed in the last 2 years, have they?
I don't believe my philosophy has changed much fundamentally, no. Not that I've noticed, not that others have addressed to me.
And your goal has been and is today to prevent the issuance of tickets, correct?
Yes, that's one of the goals. Well, some of the tickets, I mean, some of them I don't really care if they issue if someone's actually obstructing traffic or something like that. I mean, I think there's probably better ways of solving it than tickets, but I want to stop them from being able to get tickets if I can do so. If I can fill those meters and spend a small amount of money to prevent someone else from having to spend a large amount, I'd like to help people like that.
And if that means interfering with Jane and Lynn doing their jobs, that's part of your goal, isn't it, to prevent them from issuing those tickets?
Well, I don't want to interfere with anyone, so I'm not interfering with them in any way in the sense of they have personal space that I respect. If they make a legitimate respect about my space, I would honor it. But as I've mentioned, there's been no addressing of any sort of issue with me being too close to them in the time frame that is being
Is that too close, that photograph in the videotape, from your perspective?
From my understanding of the camera that Ian was using, I believe it was the same one that he's using today. I would estimate he's probably about 10 feet away from her in that photo, and you could also get a judge by how when you see people cross by them that they're probably about equidistant between the two people they're running past. So no, I don't believe that Ian was necessarily violating her personal space. I mean, I may not agree with the content or like the necessarily language of how he was delivering it and like the timing or necessarily, but I don't think proximity wise that he's in any way like offending her.
You don't think, having seen this video and this photograph, which for the record is at 1 minute and 1 second, you don't think that that's offensive to Lynn?
He's not violating any of her rights, from my understanding. I mean, she may find it offensive. That's a subjective call. I feel like I'd be speculating as to how she should respond to something.
You don't think that's bothersome? From your point of view, if you were out on the street yesterday or tomorrow, and the conduct that you saw in this video, and this still at 1 minute and 1 second, you don't think that's bothersome to Lynn or Jane?
Well, if you're asking about the still, I find nothing offensive about the still. I suppose if you're saying bothersome, that maybe the idea that they were both talking over each other at the same time is like not effective way to converse. But you know, that's whether or not I'd say that's offensive necessarily. That's a subjective thing for the people in that certain instance, I guess, to interpret.
You wouldn't do it, would you?
That's not me in the video. I wasn't there that day, so.
You wouldn't do it, would you?
I wouldn't do what specifically?
You wouldn't do what that video and that still depicts to Jane and Linda, would you?
I mean, I guess I could.
It's a yes or a no.
It's like asking me if I've ever like talked over someone, or you know, I don't want to talk over people, so I try not to.
Well, you answer the question, the direct question, yes or no.
Objection, he has answered the question, and you cannot, there's no possible grounds for limiting to yes or no answers, particularly on this question.
You can answer that question, yes or no.
Overall, you don't have to answer yes or no. I don't think it necessarily calls for a yes or no answer only. If you want to explain your answer, you can certainly do that.
Well, I've observed Linda behaving in a manner similar to as Ian observed in this video, and I've recorded it, and I've had less dialogue with her. I think there have been other times where she's done a similar moving back and forth, only it's been from across the street, meaning that I don't know how long it is across the 2 lanes of traffic, but it may be 30 feet, and she'll be moving back and forth based on like my movements if I'm trying to get in front of her, so I basically can never get in front of her, always behind her if she's turning. But yeah, I mean, if you're asking if I've had the same interaction as Ian had, no, like he's his own person, like if, you know, because I wouldn't have talked over someone or try not to talk over people, like there may be talking over people in this video, but I don't know. I hope that answers the question.
And you have it, in fact, videotaped within 5 feet or so, of Lynn
5 feet. If I was within 5 feet of them, I was probably, within the time frame we're speaking of, there may have been a place where like I crossed them on the sidewalk while I had a video camera rolling, and in that sense I would have been 5 feet for like a short period of time. But for the most part, no, I would not be maintaining 5 feet of space between them and videotaping, because as I said, since the last trial, they made it pretty clear that they like don't want to be near us, so I respect that, and I'm not within that close proximity of 5 feet.
Didn't they make that clear to you before the last trial, when they would tell you to get back, back off, Garret? They told you that before the trial too, didn't they? But you didn't do that. It was only after the trial.
That's a compound question. Objection.
Sustained.
They told you to back off more than 5 feet before the last trial, didn't they? Just answer that yes or no, and we'll take the next piece.
Well, I'd have to directly refer to my testimony 2 years ago, in which I stated there was one instance where Lynn told me that she wanted extra space, and I wasn't even within 5 feet of her at that time. And then there was another time where Jane asked for 15 feet, seemingly under the direction of Peter Thomas.
Let me show you your testimony, page 427, line 5. I said, how close were you when you took photograph number 1? And what did you tell the court under oath?
5 to 8 feet. Do you have photograph number 1? Maybe we could pull it up.
You said, quote, I would estimate between 5 and 8 feet, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. No, I don't remember what photograph number 1 was, but it may have been while I was crossing her and crossing paths with her or something. But again, this is referring to something that was older as well, prior to the dates that were specified at the beginning of the testimony.
And with regard to crossing the street, you said that you might have to be within 5 feet of Jane and Linda crossing the street. Well, you can wait until they cross the street, or you can go across the street before them in order to avoid that 10 feet distance, or even that 15 feet distance, can't you?
Well, the thing about crossing the street is that there's traffic, and you have to wait until the traffic stops, and then pedestrians are allotted time to cross. So generally, there will be an accumulation of people at a street corner.
Not being given an opportunity to finish his answer.
I think, would you, and this happens all the time, and I take it that Attorney Bauer in part didn't feel like he was getting an answer to his questions, so that's why I jumped in. But let's, if you want further clarification, we can do that. But why don't you finish your answer, and then Attorney Bauer will pose the next question.
Okay, so no, you can't just cross the street whenever you wish to, because traffic will strike you. And so people will generally have to wait, and there's an area in the sidewalk in which you'd be off to the side so you're not obstructing people wanting to walk by. And if the parking enforcer and myself wish to cross the same street, I won't be standing right next to them. I'll give them the breadth of that area I'm describing if they wish to have it, and they take it usually, or they walk a different way.
As we sit here today, having been through 3 days of trial in the Supreme Court and another trial day, are you willing to stay back 10 or 15 feet from Lynn and Jane?
My understanding is that Lynn and Jane have not raised a proximity issue concerning myself in the time frame we're describing, so it hasn't been an issue, and I don't see why it would continue to be an issue that there would be some sort of obstruction of their personal space.
So you are not willing to do that voluntarily, correct?
I'm not going to voluntarily ban myself from a certain space of someone whom I do wish to like walk past, given all respect to their space on the sidewalk, given the activity they're doing. So no, I'm not going to voluntarily decide that I'm not going to be within X amount of feet of someone. That's kind of strange. Everyone, I believe in equality, like everyone has the same rights, like everyone has the same personal space rights.
Thank you.
Further direct examination?
Garret, I had asked you about 10 feet distance, and Attorney Bauer sort of upped the ante and started asking about 30 feet. If you had to stay 30 feet away from the parking enforcement officers at all times, how would that affect your ability to engage in Robin Hood activity?
Well, the reason I say that it's necessary to come within a few feet of them at some times is because if you don't, that would mean you're trying to pass around buildings, going around entire blocks. You're basically going to lose sight of them if you were to choose to go an alternate route in lieu of crossing within 5 to 10 feet of someone on a sidewalk at a given time. So being 30 feet away would mean all it takes is for them to change direction, and effectively you'd have to run around an entire city block in order to get back ahead of them, which is pretty ineffective. They can walk that amount of space before you could even run that amount of space, and I really don't want to be having to like run around in different areas to try and be ahead of someone a certain amount of space. That's what I consider to be somewhat unreasonable. It's quite a long distance, 30 feet.
Now, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any further cross-examination? No, sir. Okay. You may step down, Mr. Ian.
Your Honor, defendants call us our next witness, Ian Freeman. Ian, you may want to bring your laptop up just so if you're asked any questions about the videotape, you can, it's okay with the court.
I think probably either for them to play on there.
Pardon? Okay, can you play in the courtroom or not?
It would probably be easier to just use theirs since they've got it.
I think we don't want to break down this setup here.
Yeah, but it would be all right to just
but no, just for your sake, not for the court's sake, just for your sake. If some question comes up, we need to look at it.
Okay.
Let me say, one of the way, if the question is that if there's a portion that people want to see, we could always have counsel come up, and I think we've done this in the past. Mr. Freeman could just play whatever it needs, and we could do it with counsel, and I could see it at the same time.
Right. Now, Ian, first let me swear you in. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear, affirm, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I affirm, I tell the truth.
Thank you. Please be seated. Please state for the record your full name and current address.
I'm Ian Freeman, and my address is 73 Leverett Street in Keene.
All right, let me start with Free State, since some of the responsibility for that organization has been attributable to you. Now, is organization...
Did you say Free State or Free Keene? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Free Keene. Is organization a correct term to use to describe Free Keene?
Not really. It's a blog, sort of in the same way that, that like a newspaper. I guess there's an organization to a newspaper as well, but Free Keene is a blog where I'm the creator of the blog, and then I invite people to blog at that website, including Garret and maybe about a dozen other folks from across the state. But it's commonly misconstrued and used as a pejorative term here in Keene by certain people.
Now, putting aside for a minute Free Keene, is there any other organization that has any type of affiliation, connection, involvement with Robin Hood activity?
Not to my knowledge, and not everyone who's Robin Hooded has been a blogger at Free Keene.
And Garret testified that Free Keene doesn't have officers, correct? There's no president, vice president, treasurer?
That's correct. There are no meetings, no officers, nothing like that. I run the website. I'm the administrator of the site, but as Garret testified, there's no editorial approval. Everyone has just free reign to post whatever they feel is appropriate.
To your knowledge, is there any sort of central entity of any form or shape that sort of organizes, directs, and coordinates Robin Hood activity?
I think for a period of time, are we talking about within the last 2 years?
Yes.
Within the last 2 years, no.
And do you, have you engaged in Robin Hood activity in the last 2 years?
Yes.
Okay. And is that based upon direction or requests from other people, or is it a spontaneous decision you've made on your own?
It's always been spontaneous on my part. Just whenever I'm out and about in downtown Keene for whatever reason, in the case of the video, I was helping James Cleveland do his campaign and giving people rides to the polls is what I was doing down there. But just whatever I'm happen to be downtown, if I spot one of the parking enforcers, I usually have my backpack with me, and I always have a baggie full of change and the Robin Hood calling cards. So more of an opportunist, I guess, in that way.
Have you ever directed, required, or sort of otherwise gotten someone else to engage in Robin Hooding activity?
Never. The only thing that would come close to that would be inviting people during Keenevention to go out and kind of experience Robin Hooding, and that was testified to earlier.
That's like a one day a year.
It's a weekend, so we're Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and of course they don't enforce on Sunday, so Friday and Saturday visitors are invited to go out with James or Garret and just kind of experience it, and that's just because it's a fun thing for people to do. It's been in the news and people are curious about it, so they want to know what it's like, and it gives them that chance to experience it because it's fun to help people.
Now, in the last 2 years, since October 2013, approximately how many times have you engaged in Robin Hood activity?
You know, I can only think of twice, but it might be 3 to 4, perhaps, if maximum.
So, to the best of your recollection, less than 6.
Oh, absolutely.
And is it correct that one of those instances was captured on this video that's been shown in the court?
That's correct.
And who took the video?
I did.
Now, and I take it this occurred in the proximity of the campus of Keene State?
Yeah, we're right out front of Keene State on Main Street in Keene.
And you were there for the purpose of helping people? There's a ballot box there or nearby?
So the idea was to give the college students rides to the Ward 1 voting location. So I was positioned on the street with my car awaiting college students who wanted to get a ride.
And there was testimony there was somebody else present with you?
Yes, there was Matthew Roach was present.
Why was he present?
I think he was also there helping with the campaign in some way, but he was a little ways away.
You say helping with the campaign, you mean the electoral campaign?
Correct. Yeah, James Cleveland was in the race at that time.
Now, the view in the video is primarily of people walking up and down a sidewalk. What is if you could just describe the location, and particularly where the parking meters are located in that area?
So in the freeze frame that we're at right now, the parking meters are behind me, maybe 15 feet. It's a fairly wide grassy area between the sidewalk and the parking meters.
So there's a road, parking meters at the edge of the curb.
That's right.
Then a fairly wide grassy stretch, and then the sidewalk.
Correct.
Right?
And then you get on campus past that fence there.
Now, during the time that you were filming this video, which I think has been identified as being approximately 4 minutes, how far or close were you approximately to the parking enforcement officer?
I probably never got much closer than, I would say, 6 feet away. If you look during the video, you'll see the sidewalk is also maybe as wide as Lynn is tall there, and she's toward the fence side of it, and I am on the grassy area. So it's wide enough of a berth to actually give people the ability to walk between her and I. I never really felt like I was getting anywhere near her personal space, nor would I want to.
Now, you saw the video, at a certain point, she puts her hand up like this, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And during that time, a verbal exchange is occurring between you and her, correct?
Yeah, I believe at that moment she says, "I've had enough."
Okay. And as she puts up her hand, are you anywhere in near her personal space?
Absolutely not. If you were to play that portion of the video, you would see that there's more than enough room for someone to walk by between the two of us at that time.
So, from your observation, when she puts up her hand like that, what is she doing?
She's verbally expressing that she wants me to stop, and so she's also giving that indicator. She doesn't want me to be there doing what I was doing.
And once the video in that case stopped, did you continue to engage in Robin Hood activity?
No, I continued to await students for rides to the polls.
Now, if the judge were to order that you and the other named defendants were to stay, were always at all times to be more than 10 feet away from the parking enforcement officers, how would that affect your ability or the effectiveness of your ability to engage in Robin Hooding?
It would basically kill the ability to Robin Hood because, as I think Garret testified to earlier, I want to stay in front of. There's been a lot of talk about following people. I'm not interested in following anyone because then I can't rescue anyone from getting a ticket. So I want to be ahead of them, and as a single person, I don't usually have anyone out with me to assist. So as a single person Robin Hooding, my goal is to feed the meter prior to them reaching the meter, and then also leave the calling card on the front window. So while they're walking towards my direction, I'm feeding the meter, then going to the windshield to leave a calling card, and I still have to be in front of them by the time I'm done with all of that if I want to keep saving people from getting tickets. So it's in my interest to stay ahead of them, but they'll play little games where they'll get up to one of the corners, and if I've walked too far ahead, they'll turn the other direction down that street, so then I have to go and close the gap and once again get ahead of them. Or I'll be standing at a street corner waiting for traffic to clear so I can keep going, and they'll again close the gap. So anytime that they close the gap, I would then be in violation of some sort of theoretical order, which would be a problem. And it certainly would be a problem further if I was just eating downtown at a restaurant.
Are there times in which you are plugging the meter and the parking enforcement officers within 10 feet of you when you're doing that?
I would prefer that not happen, but there have been some cases where Jane has maybe doubled her speed to try to get ahead of me when I'm ahead of her.
It's almost like a race to the parking meter.
I don't know if she considers it that, but perhaps.
Now, let's put aside the Robin Hooding activity for a minute. You live in Keene, correct?
I do.
Do you frequent downtown Keene?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If the court put in an order that you could not be within 10 feet of the parking enforcement officer at any time while that parking enforcement officer was on duty, how would that affect your day-to-day life as a citizen of Keene?
I would be super paranoid downtown because I would always have to wonder if I was going to come within that radius, and could I even sit out and enjoy a nice summer day at a restaurant without having to be worried about jumping out of my chair and running into the street to avoid some sort of contempt of court charge.
Now this day may not be a great example, but I take it that there are days when the downtown sidewalks of Keene have like outdoor tables overflowing from the local restaurants and stuff like that.
Certainly.
And is it fairly common for the parking enforcement officers, as part of their normal routes, to come within 10 feet of those areas?
It would be unavoidable for them to do that. Yeah, they would have to.
In your opinion, if you were required to stay at least 10 feet away from the parking enforcement officers, or potentially further, would that potentially create any public safety issues?
Well, certainly. I mean, if if I were Robin Hooding 30 feet ahead of them, and then they started to close the gap, and I'm waiting at a crosswalk, then I either jump out into traffic or I get a contempt of court charge. So that could be a real danger.
Thank you. I've got no further questions.
Cross-examination.
So, Mr. Freeman, time frame is the last 2 years. So, Mr. Freeman, your point is to shut down the parking enforcement department, isn't it?
I would say that it's a very general statement, and while I wouldn't be sad to see the parking enforcement department shut down, I think that optimally, I don't have an objection with people having rules for parking on their private property. So what I'd like to see is the business owners downtown having control over the spaces that are adjacent to their property, and let the market decide how to handle enforcement. But ultimately, we don't need the state to handle that.
And don't you think it's absolutely true that the fewer parking enforcement officers that are on the street, that means fewer tickets issued, correct?
That sounds accurate.
And you would absolutely be in favor that that Jane and Lynn and anybody else that might be hired quit their jobs, correct?
I would hope that they would find some productive employment where they're actually providing a market desirable service to people.
And you would absolutely want them to quit their jobs, wouldn't you?
That wouldn't be an objectionable thing. No, I don't think so.
In fact, you've already said that that's one of your goals, isn't it?
Well, like I said, I would like to see the entire department shut down, and that would include all of the parking employees.
You've already said that that is one of your goals, that they quit their jobs, correct?
Sure.
And the parking enforcement department has not shut down, has it?
No, they haven't.
It didn't shut down 2 years ago?
No, but they are writing fewer tickets.
It didn't shut down within the last 2 years?
That's correct.
And presumably, it's not going to shut down tomorrow, is it?
I presume you're right about that.
Presumably, those two people that you've been following...
Excuse me, I haven't been following people.
I'm sorry, Lynn and Jane are people.
I think I pointed out before that it's my goal to walk in front of the parking enforcers, which would mean they're following me in that case.
My point is that Jane and Linda are going to continue to issue tickets today and tomorrow and the next day, aren't they?
Well, I would hope that they have a pang of conscience and decide to not do that anymore.
And you want to be part of that shutdown, preventing them from issuing tickets, don't you?
What I want to do is save people from getting tickets, which makes people's lives better.
And in order to do that, you're willing to attempt to try to get Jane and Lynn, two people, to stop issuing tickets, correct?
Well, when I'm...
No, wait.
You know...
Objection, no.
Council would approach. Council would approach.
Yep.
Could you re-ask your question?
Your goal is to shut down the parking enforcement department, correct?
That's how you're interpreting the goal. I wouldn't mind seeing that happen, but my primary goal, sir, is to save people from getting parking tickets. If they decide to shut down the department, I consider that a bonus.
I'm going to move to strike the answer and ask you to admonish the witness to answer the question, please. The question was, your goal was to shut down the parking department entirely.
He's asking me what my goal is, and I explained what my goal is.
Can I respond?
Yes.
I understand this is cross-examination, but when I questioned the parking enforcement officers this morning, their questions, their responses, at least in my opinion, went considerably beyond the scope of my question. And the court permitted that, and I think Mr. Freeman is entitled to the same latitude.
Well, I understand the general concern about the question, but if it goes beyond what the question calls for and there's a proper motion to strike, I'll strike it. But I think right now, he's trying to explain what his goals are, and I think that's a fair response. So the motion to strike is denied, and you may complete your response, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't appreciate you trying to tell me what my goals are, sir.
Okay, well, that's stricken. That goes now. You're editorializing. You can answer the question, but you can't use this as an opportunity to just launch on counsel. Confine your response to the question that was posed.
Okay. Well, then I'll leave it as it was prior to his motion.
Let's take a look at your testimony. Page 475, line 1. Quote, what did you testify?
That says,
read it verbatim, please.
My point is, I would like to see the parking enforcement department shut down entirely. However, I don't know what came before that.
End quote. Now, is your goal the same today?
That is a bonus. That is not the primary goal of Robin Hooding.
Is your point the same today as it was back when you testified under oath?
Would I like to see the parking enforcement shut down? Yes, I would like to see that happen.
And you want to see that happen tomorrow, correct?
I'm not unrealistic. Obviously, that's not going to happen tomorrow.
But your point your goal is the same, that you want to see it shut down entirely tomorrow and next week.
Anytime would be fine.
Right.
How about the next hour?
I would ask that Attorney Bauer maintain some distance from the witness during the course of the question.
15 feet?
I'm not intimidated.
I thought we might hear something along that line.
How about 5 feet?
I'm not intimidated by your presence. It's fine. You can get as close as you like.
Okay.
And the next question that I wanted to show you on page 475.
Please feel free to come back up. Really, it's
Your Honor, I would ask that when the witness is asked questions, that he be given the chance not only read the question and answer, but also see the context of the testimony.
I think that's fair. If you're going to ask him about a specific page, you should be able to see the page.
Page 475. The question was, read it out loud, please.
This is your question. What I asked you, though, was if there are fewer parking enforcement officers on the street, that means fewer tickets issued, correct?
And your answer was, quote,
absolutely true.
end quote, correct?
Yeah, I believe you already asked me that question here today.
Same point back 2 years ago as it is today?
Yep, I would say that's accurate.
Fewer tickets, right?
Sure.
And part of your answer before on page 470?
Your Honor, I understand the use of transcript to impeach the witness and raise question the witness's credibility, but I do not believe it is permissible to ask the witness about his testimony 2 years ago when that testimony was identical to what was just given today. That's not, there's no credibility issues there. Just repeating what he's already said, and the hearing where we're supposed to be talking about recent events.
Well, I think the point was, and I'm going to allow as cross-examination that really to relating it to the recent activities and that the goals and what's trying to be accomplished hasn't changed in a couple of years. So as I've allowed both sides to do that, to explain and put into context the recent activities, so the objection's overruled.
So you want them to quit their jobs, don't you?
That would be fine with me if they quit their jobs. I would love to see them take a productive role in the economy.
And you'd like to take a little bit of credit for them quitting their jobs, wouldn't you?
Not really. I'm barely out there on the streets.
Well, you think their jobs are immoral, don't you?
Oh, yes. It's very wrong to threaten people with the stealing of their cars if they don't pay this arbitrary demand. And so, you know, when they testified earlier to being afraid on the streets and being anxious about wherever the Robin Hooders might be, well, it's like a little taste of their own medicine in that case, because the people of Keene are always afraid of where they are. I mean, don't people think about the people who are getting the tickets? That's why I'm out there. I want to help those people and stop them from getting tickets.
I'd move to strike the remainder of that answer, Judge, is not responsive.
Your Honor, I would object to the moving strike on the grounds that it is certainly responsive to a type of question that is where you're asking someone about their ideology, where it's not responsive to a yes or no. But, Your Honor, I'd also like to raise a broader point, and I want to call it an objection.
Could we approach the bench with this?
Yes, that would be good. But I'm going to give Mr. Freeman the opportunity to respond, so the motion to strike is denied.
The most effective way for you is to be about 15 feet or so in front of a PEO, Linda or Jane, maybe 10 feet. Isn't that the most effective way?
No, actually it would be more effective if I knew they weren't going to play games and try to change directions. I could be more than that further away. But yes, as of the current status, being about 15 feet is the most effective because they can always change directions. If they were going to go on a predetermined path, then I could be further away from them.
You said that back 2 years ago, and you say it today, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. I think you testified you don't like to invade people's space, right?
Yeah, I have no interest in invading personal space.
That's not invading space?
She's got plenty of space.
Okay, Mr. Freeman, you have to let Attorney Bauer finish the question.
Sorry, I thought he asked it.
No problem.
We're going to just, for the record, we're going to roll the video.
I got to put the sound back on.
Silly, silly. Do they pay you to walk back and forth like that? Well, I appreciate you asking, but you're a government official, so you're subject to being talked to. Part of the, the Constitution of the Constitution of New Hampshire. Part of the Constitution of New Hampshire is that government officials are supposed to be open and accountable. And so, to be accountable, this isn't harassment, ma'am. I'm simply talking to you as a government official. You're someone who should listen to what the people have to say. And in point of fact, as a member of parking enforcement, it is part of your job and your job description to actually put up with what people have to say to you. Because a lot of people don't like getting parking tickets, do they? Oh, well, that's okay. I expect that to happen. Because we do activist stuff, and you know, that means that some people are going to get upset about it. Do you think that her bosses will be happy to pay her to walk back and forth all day? No, they can't do real stuff.
If you leave me alone, I'll go.
Well, why don't you leave these people alone? Go back to your truck and drive away.
Oh my God.
Okay, doesn't look like it. I think your job is...
You said you were, go back to your truck and drive away, didn't you?
I did say that, but were you going to ask me a question about distance? Isn't that the reason you were playing that?
Further questions?
Further direct examination?
I would like to comment on that since he played it for the purpose of...
Wait, are you finished with your...
I don't have any further questions.
Yeah, Ian, just in regard to this most recent clip here, how far away were you approximately? Well, let me ask you this. You can see there's a sidewalk, and you testified that there's a lawn, strip of lawn, and then the road. When you're taking these videos, are you on the sidewalk or on the lawn?
I'm on the lawn, and further, when we watched that video just now, you saw that at one point she was closer to the fence in the beginning of the video, so on the other side of the sidewalk from me where I was on the grass. At one point, two females jogged by between us on the sidewalk. So there's enough room, you know, even if you thought I was still on the sidewalk, and I wasn't at any point until I got off the grassy area later on in the video, two females jog by, and then after that, Linda gets closer to me. She closes the gap, so obviously she wasn't too uncomfortable.
Now, she does walk back and forth, essentially, correct?
Multiple times.
At any point during this video, does she ever back away from you?
If anything, she got closer to me, as I just pointed out.
And at any point in terms of, again, just your Robin Hooding activity since October 2013, has either of the parking enforcement officers ever asked you to back away from them in terms of physical space?
No, I've never had that happen.
I have no further questions, John.
Further cross-examination?
You've hemmed her against the fence, haven't you?
No, sir.
There's a fence in this video, in this still, at, what is the number? At 218. You've hemmed her against the fence, haven't you?
No, absolutely not.
You're not plugging any meters here, are you?
That's correct. The meters are behind me, so I'm protecting them by virtue.
You're not blogging here, are you?
I did blog this video later in the day, as a matter of fact.
You're not you're not trying to shut down the government here, are you?
Of course not. At this point, I'm just questioning a government agent.
Right. You're taunting her, aren't you?
No, absolutely not.
You're harassing her, aren't you?
No, sir. It is not harassing to ask an agent questions.
And there's no reason for you to be within that proximity but to be bothersome.
If you consider asking someone questions as per the 8th Amendment to the New Hampshire Constitution that a government agent must be open and accountable, if you consider that bothersome, then that's certainly your opinion, sir, but I consider it my right to inquire of government officials. And if I'm going to inquire of a government official, I need to be within listening distance so I don't have to shout at them. And I was not in any way in her personal space, as was seen by two women side by side jogging between us.
From your point of view, were you bothersome to Lynn during her job hours?
That would be a question to ask Lynn.
I'm asking you.
I don't know what Lynn would say, but I would presume she would say that she was bothered by that. She certainly acted that way.
Thank you. You may step down, Mr. Freeman. Any additional witnesses for the defense? Well, I should ask counsel to approach.
Each like a 2-minute break.
That's why I know that it was the purpose, for the purpose that we talked about earlier. I'll take a short recess and then we'll
Aaron and I have discussed October 19th would work best for us. I have a busy schedule next week, if that's agreeable to the court.
Your Honor, I think the predicate related point to that is I think we're both in agreement that in terms of a further session for oral argument, that is unnecessary unless the court, I mean, from my point of view, the only purpose of oral argument would be to answer your questions, so that if the court feels after it receives memos from us that it wants oral argument, we'd be happy to do it, but I don't see the need at this point to have it scheduled or hold on to that date for next Friday.
Let me say that we all have, going back a couple of years now, and between what's happened in the earlier proceedings before this court, what's happened in terms of briefing before the Supreme Court's decision, what's happened today, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that the 19th is a fine time frame to do that, and if after reviewing the parties' memoranda of law, I think there's some need for it, we can talk about it at that point, but I don't believe there will be. I think that there's one issue that I'm hopeful that counsel will address, and I don't mean to suggest anything by posing this question, but it's something that I've been looking at, and that's the question of cases in which a court has upheld a floating zone. Like, where are there instances where a court has found that, and again, there's lots of constitutional issues. I don't mean to say that that's the only question that people should focus on, but I'm wondering if counsel could see whether there's any authority in situations where someone has done that, because I see in a lot of the abortion rights cases out of the U.S. Supreme Court that there's concern expressed about this concept of a floating zone and issues associated with that, and the justices talk about some of the issues related to that and enforcement of those issues. Maybe that you're not able to find anything, but if you can and try to address that in part of your pleadings, I would appreciate that. But the 19th is certainly an acceptable time frame for both sides. And do you want to just say at that point, no rebuttal arguments? I think you all know what the issues are, and I don't even think that's necessary.
Well, either side, in an unanticipated scenario, either side comes up with an argument that wasn't anticipated by the other side. I suppose we could always file a motion for leave to file a rebuttal. Hopefully we won't get to that point.
Why don't we handle it that way? I think the 19th is absolutely an acceptable time frame. That's a couple weeks from Monday, so it's not trying to force things too quickly, but that's absolutely acceptable, and that'll be the order of the court, and I'll defer ruling, obviously, until I've seen all of your memos of law. Okay, great. Thank you all very much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeene.com. Freekeene.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeene.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeene.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.